Clock. Jacob, are you ready?
I am ready, sir. I'm about to go live on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, and we are live. The meeting is yours whenever you'd like to start.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Commerce Township Planning Commission meeting to order. I will ask you to silence your cell phones and muzzle your dogs so we can get this meeting going. Obviously, you people have seen the agenda and you understand that we have a lot to do. I'm going to ask the people that are going to speak tonight to be concise and give us what they can because we have a long meeting tonight. With that, we're going to go to the approval agenda. However, the chair is making a motion to cover items H1 and I1 together and H2 and I2 together, so we don't have to skip around like we did in the last couple of meetings. This will give us a lot more continuity, and I think that would be good. Deb, you have that motion?
I do.
Okay, I need a second.
Second.
Roll call vote to
Haber?
approve the agenda.
Haber,
Yes.
Harrell,
Aye.
Rebeck,
Aye.
McKeever,
Aye.
Winkler,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Kareem.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carried unanimously.
Okay, the motion is carried. And then that's just for the motion to approve the minute, to approve the changes. Do we need another motion to approve the minutes? Approve the agenda? I believe we do. So,
No, I would say motion to amend the agenda on that one, and it's approved. So I don't think you need a second motion for the agenda.
all right, then we'll continue on. Approval of the meeting minutes from February 1st. Are there any additions or corrections? I hear no additions or corrections. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as stand.
Larry, I make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 1st Planning Commission meeting as written.
I hear a second?
I'd second that, Larry.
Brian Perrell seconds it. Okay, Debbie, you have to call it. Sorry, I'm get used to
That's
calling
okay.
it myself.
Winkler,
Aye.
Harrell,
Aye.
Kareem,
Aye.
Rebeck,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
McKeever,
Aye.
Haber.
Aye. All right, we approve the minutes meetings as written. Updated activities in Commerce Township. Bill, I'll start with you because I always like to pick on you the most.
The ZBA has not had an agenda since our last meeting.
All right, very good. George?
A couple of items from our February 9th Township Board meeting. First, we approved the site plan for the Towns at Merrill Park. That's the townhomes that will be across the street from the Pulte subdivision across the street from Town Hall. We also had another spirited discussion on the LISTIC system, which is a potential system within our water treatment plant to turn our waste into a Class A fertilizer that can be sold and used on farmland within the state of Michigan. We hired an approved budgeted new maintenance worker that will be working for Mark Schroeder. We approved the demolition of the home at 3400 Union Lake Road, which the township owns, which is part of the overall Union Lake corridor process. And finally, we approved the PUD for the reserve at Crystal Lake. And that will now be moving forward to the brownfield approval stages with an expectation that there are no more hurdles for them to cross.
George, a question, if I may. You had mentioned last meeting about an ordinance officer. Has anything come of that?
Mr. Gray, our supervisor, has been continuing to work on it, and Jay might have more input into it. But I think it's moving forward. It's just how it's going to be structured. So we did not have that on the agenda for the last meeting, but it is not gone away. It's continuing in process.
Okay, thank you. The DDA, Brian Winkler, or Debbie, are you going to speak also about this, seeing that you're the acting director? But let's hear from Brian first.
I'll let Brian present.
Well, Larry, at the February 16th DDA meeting, it was our first meeting with Deb as the acting executive director of the DDA. And in regards to Randy Thomas's insight report, Parcel B1, Phase 1, which is the Akins development. Akins is exploring possible joint venture with a Columbus, Ohio developer. And Bruce Akins will be attending a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, the DDA, and the Township Board that is planned for April 27th to update all of those people per se. It has not yet been scheduled, but it has been, that date will be the date of the meeting, although a scheduler hasn't been sent out. Parcel K, which is, as we know, the self-storage facility. The purchasers to come in front of the PC at today's meeting and for a public hearing on their special land use and potentially for their site plan approval. And then Parcel L, which has been kind of going back and forth with Goddard Schools. The purchase agreement with Goddard Schools was approved and executed. And it is again contingent upon the removal of the pathway from Merrill Park to Haggerty Road. And the variance application for this item will be reviewed at tonight's Planning Commission meeting as well. And the Township Board will review it at their March 9th meeting. And then a couple other housekeeping items. We approved the acting DDA executive director contract. We reviewed the job descriptions for both the executive director and the executive director assistant. And then as far as committee reports on the finance side, there's a new finance committee chair. That'll be Susan Spalker. And as was budgeted, Molly Phillips is going to request on the DDA's behalf a $1.5 million advance from the Township Board. Again, that was as budgeted. That's all I've got. If Deb wants to add anything, please do so.
Deb?
Thank you, Brian. I think you've covered it all this evening.
All right, I just have a quick question to you, Brian, or Deb, or anybody that has the answer to it. Does the DDA director need to be a resident in Commerce Township, or is it open to anybody that wishes to apply for the job?
It is open to anyone who wishes to apply.
Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank
Jay
you.
James, if you're still on there, do you have anything you want to add from the building department?
No, it's not super busy right now with plans, but we're trying to catch up on some other items throughout the township. We're starting
Okay,
to hook the township hall up to sanitary sewer. We got started on that today.
okay.
Mentioned we're demoing the house at 3400 Union Lake Road. We're also hanging up some blinds in the township to help with the sun glare in the spring. So just doing some little other projects right now since the plans have slowed down as they typically do this time of year.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
Yeah, we have several engineering plan reviews in from site plans that you approved. So I expected the work's going to pick up for Jay and I later in the summer. So we've got about four or five engineering plan reviews in right now.
Okay, thank you. Public discussions of matters that is interest to the public that is not on our agenda. Jason, you said you had one person that was on there, and that was the Larry Gray. He is the township supervisor. Do you have anybody else in the public that would like to speak?
Yeah, we had another person join, so I'm just going to say it again, just in case you don't know. It is *9 to raise your hand if you would like to talk to the board. Please just state your first, last name, and your address when talking to them. And just like in a regular meeting, you'll get 2 minutes to talk, and then the board will review whatever you had to say. And I'm looking now, it doesn't look like we have anyone from the public raising their hand. So if you guys would like to, you can move on.
We're going to move on then to E1, which is carbon neutral development. We have a presentation by Jan Culbertson. Dave, you want to introduce Jan?
Sure. This is Ms. Culbertson is a colleague of Brian Winkler, who obviously is the secretary of our planning commission. Brian's been asking for a couple months, patiently requesting that his colleague, Ms. Culbertson, make a presentation to the planning commission regarding carbon neutral development. And we agreed to do it at the meeting this evening. So I think when I spoke with Mrs. Culbertson last week, she thinks that her presentation will take 10, 15 minutes, and then she wants to have a few minutes for questions and answers if the planning commission has any. And given that we have a busy agenda, I thought having her right off the top might be a good idea so that all our developers who are on tonight's meeting can learn along with the planning commission about carbon neutral development. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Culbertson.
Ms. Culbertson, you're on, and if you can be concise, I would appreciate it.
Okay, that's great. And I would just want to make sure you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, let's try this. Okay, you should now. Does that work?
Yes.
There you go. Got it.
All right, excellent. I have a lot to pack in, so here we go. I'm Jan Culbertson, and thank you very much for making some time. And I'm also an architect and chair of a planning commission in Scioto Township, which is west of Ann Arbor. So thank you very much for your attention this evening. And so I want to talk about carbon neutral development. And this is actually a photo of the Viridian County Farm Park, which is a development in Ann Arbor. And I will send you kind of a poster. You can also access it online. It's a very interesting development that is not only carbon neutral, but proposing to be carbon positive in that it will generate more energy than it uses. Carbon neutral development, you really have to start with a definition, and people do take different definitions, but basically it's a development that is designed to significantly reduce its total energy consumption and then use renewable energy resources and carbon offsets to meet the remaining demand. Carbon neutrality can include the operating energy of the buildings in the development, embodied energy, the energy that went into the construction of the materials to make up that, the infrastructure and the buildings, the site energy that is generated, and also occupant travel, which has to do with commuting, deliveries, etc. So how you define carbon neutrality does make a difference. And a lot of carbon neutrality goals have come out of declaring a climate emergency. And this has happened in multiple municipalities, states, different jurisdictions all over the country, in fact, globally. And when you have an emergency, timing is everything. It means that you need to get on it and take significant action to address that emergency. And our emergency basically is our own doing. We've been emitting tons of global warming pollution into the thin shell of our atmosphere every day. And we've kind of treated it like an open sewer of the past. And the basics around this are that energy from the sun comes to the earth in the form of light, right? That energy is absorbed and it warms the earth. This has worked out wonderfully, right? We can habit our planet. We have a beautiful blue marble, if you will. Some of that energy then is radiated from the earth in the form of heat. And we have the planet has this atmosphere that has been very thin, and it's trapped that heat and kept our temperatures stable. However, with this emission of the global warming, we've we thicken that atmosphere. So it's like the greenhouse effect, right? So the planet is warming. And there are many sources of that warming. It has to do with, you know, things that we can control, things that we don't control, forest fires, our electricity generation, things like industrial processes, mining, even the thawing of the permafrost contributes to these release of the global warming gases. But the largest source of global warming is the burning of fossil fuels. And this is a graph. You can look at the exponential global warming from fossil fuels since 1950. So why is it an emergency? So if you take a look at what we've been emitting, you can create a carbon budget that we have to keep that thin atmospheric shell around us, the insulation blanket, if you will, to keep our global temperatures from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius. People have probably seen that, and Paris Agreement is sort of based on that. And if we keep that carbon budget to 500 gigatons of CO2, we have about a 50-50 chance of keeping our global temperatures below the 1.5 degrees Celsius. At 340 gigatons, we have a 67% chance. You know, which chance do you want to take? So this is sort of what that looks like. And if we assume we had peak emissions in 2020, now we had a dip because of the pandemic, but what happens is these global warming gases, these gases stay in our atmosphere for 100 years. So even though we decrease the amount of emissions in 2020, that's like a blip. So what we're looking at is really decreasing those emissions and trying to eliminate all of the CO2 emissions by 2040, if we have a 50-50 chance. If we want to phase out it earlier, by 2040, we have a better chance of keeping it under that. So that's where these goals, these carbon neutrality goals of 2050 or 2040 come. So what's happening in the US and in Michigan? So we're seeing some significant temperature rises, and what's happening is northern Michigan is actually having a higher, more of a temperature rise than southern Michigan. We are also having more precipitation, and those events tend to be more intense. And this will continue. It seems to be an ongoing trend. So more precipitation and higher temperatures. These are some of the impacts that we're seeing. You know, Lake Superior is warming faster than many of the larger lakes all over the world. I think one of the interesting things is that we're really positioned to be a climate refuge. So if you look at what may be happening maybe 20 years into the future, Michigan is going to be a very desirable place to be. We have water, we have good temperatures. 23 states and the District of Columbia have established these greenhouse emission targets, sort of their own reduction targets to try and meet the Paris Climate Agreement. In fact, in Michigan, recently there have been executive actions setting some reductions from 1990 levels, and the goal is for the state to become a net zero carbon state by 2050. I'm from Ann Arbor, and that's where our architectural firm is. And I'm also involved in a 2030 district in Ann Arbor, which is working with commercial buildings to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And our carbon neutrality plan has 4 basic components: energy, tackling mobility, resource reduction, and adaptation and resilience. Energy is a biggie. Basically, the goals are power our grid with 100% renewable power. And that's going to make that's going to require a transformation of our grid and a very smart grid and how we use our energy in the building and balance energy storage and so forth. It's amazing what some of the researchers are doing around this. And we're going to have to significantly increase the efficiency of both our new buildings and our existing buildings. Then comes in the strategy of electrification of both our buildings and our vehicles. So it's sort of decarbonizing the building sector. And I kind of break it down into new buildings, existing buildings, and embodying carbon. And people ask, why are you electrifying buildings? And there are multiple reasons. One, if electrification puts it on the grid, and we have the ability then to make our grid fossil free. It's healthier, safer, more equitable, and it's also cheaper. Basically, natural gas is methane. And methane is a unique gas, and it only lasts in the atmosphere maybe 20 years, but it is 84 times more, it has 84 more times global warming potential than just regular CO2. So in the short term, reducing the amount of methane that is released all over the world is extremely important. There have been studies that have come out now that even homes that have gas furnaces, gas stoves, the interior measurements of carbon dioxide and nitrogen dioxide and carbon monoxide are higher than the EPA actually allows outdoors. So there's significant health benefits from electrifying homes. The Rocky Mountain Institute recently came out with, it was a really neat, they looked at building new all electric homes in different climate zones all over the country. Nearest one to ours was Minneapolis. But really what they saw is not only is there a 50% reduction in carbon emissions by going all electric, but both the upfront cost was just slightly less, and looking at a 15-year kind of a net present value was also less. So you can build in the single family realm, carbon neutral homes, all electric homes for less money. There's also global momentum towards electrification, along with multiple states within the US. Existing buildings, you look at existing buildings a little different. And basically the core thing about electric buildings or electrifying existing buildings is do it when upgrades occur. So when people are changing out their water heaters, their HVAC systems, and Mitsubishi and Trane are coming in with replacement HVAC units, rooftop units now that are heat pump dependent. Obviously, they're much more efficient, but you also have to look at your electrical loads. New buildings, most importantly, and this is where planning commissions come in, and that is providing incentives. Incentivize high efficiency development. Right now, the most stringent energy code is the IECC 2021. It is based on ASHRAE 90.1 2019. We're currently under, in Michigan, ASHRAE 90.1 2013. So we're going to try and skip and adopt the new code when it comes out. The other idea would be to incentivize an all electric development and incentivize the use of renewable power and off-site renewables. If you look at how building codes have helped us really reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and conserved energy, from 2006 to 2012, we really improved the code and the energy conservation across all building types. And we've kind of leveled off, and the 2021 code again starts to really make an impact on energy improvements in buildings. So really look at the adoption of the most current code, and that's going to be at the state level. We can't do that in other jurisdictions. So this is the basic plan for either new existing buildings. You could even do it for proposed new buildings. There's a baseline, and And a typical office building might be 105 kBTUs per square foot. This is sort of like the miles per gallon for a building, just like the miles per gallon for a car. How much energy does it take to operate this building? And the idea is to improve the energy efficiency of that building. And you can do that through the energy code. Apply as much on-site renewables as you can. These are primarily solar. And then do off-site, purchase off-site renewables. And it's very easy to purchase the off-sites right now. I don't know how many of you are familiar with My Green Power. DTE Energy has that. You can enroll as a homeowner, as a business owner. For a homeowner, it's a surcharge of about 2.2%, and you can choose whatever percentage of renewable power you want to use for your house. Same thing for a business. If you are a large energy consumer, you can do one of their rider programs, and you can get that for as little as 0.8 cents a kilowatt hour. Ford, GM, U of M have enrolled in this, and it's primarily wind power. And wind power right now is the most economical energy generation. So the third kind of component to this is embodied carbon. And embodied carbon is really the definition of all the energy it takes to produce the materials that go into buildings. And this includes the resource extraction, the manufacturing, the on-site construction, occupancy, and then ultimately the demolition and recycling of those materials. And as you increase the energy efficiency of a building and make it a high-performing building, then this embodied energy becomes something that it becomes a larger portion of what we need to be concerned about. And the embodied carbon strategies can be very complicated with life cycle assessment and so forth, but the most straightforward part is the building structure, which is often steel, and the substructure, which is concrete, represent 55% of that building's embodied carbon. So if you look at your specs and specify a low embodied carbon concrete and recycled steel, you can reduce that embodied carbon by about 50%. So kind of a summary is, we need to plan and design all of our new developments and major renovations to use no on-site fossil fuels. We should not be expanding gas infrastructure. That's really hard because oftentimes when you're doing a new development, the guy, DTE will extend the gas for free, right? And so it's really difficult to sometimes draw the line there. What kind of incentives can planning commissions provide to not expand gas? And then what kind of incentives as far as density, expedited plan review, those types of things can we do to incentivize zero carbon in the building operations? We need to promote the adoption of zero carbon codes and standards, and then also promote electrifying existing buildings. Prioritizing keeping our older buildings because we've already got that embodied carbon, that we've already paid for that carbon, we might as well use it. So really prioritize that. And then look at the embodied carbon. And there are resolutions that are that people are passing to really look at reducing the embodied carbon in our buildings. That's all energy. Big pack. Okay, mobility is a little easier. When you look at mobility, in Ann Arbor, one of the goals is decrease vehicle miles traveled by 50%. You can also look at that as reducing your vehicle, the CO2 emissions in your vehicles by 50%. How do you do that? One, promote electric vehicles. Do you have an ordinance? Do you have a parking ordinance that requires EV charging? Also increase density along any kind of transit corridors. I don't know much about Scioto or Commerce Township, but we have, one corridor in Scioto Township that has mass transit, and we're really trying to emphasize the development, increase the density along that corridor. Connect connect all your residential, your recreational and commercial nodes with non-motorized motorized transit so that you have people have the option. It's also healthy, right? You get out and you walk, you bike, you do all those things. And I think you're doing, it looks like you have some potential things for increased density, mixed use, creating places that people can really enjoy and want to come to. The idea of complete streets, there are a lot of guidelines for this, but it's making bicycling safe. People aren't going to use their bikes unless it's safe, and make things pedestrian friendly. You're doing a great job with some of your community pathway connections. And, that's wonderful. People need to have access to that recreation. EV charging forward. There are incredible incentives right now for businesses and for individuals to provide charging stations. I want to just touch a little bit on resource reduction. And this is developing a circular economy, so that you support community recycling, composting, encourage reuse centers. This is sort of, around not so much stuff, right? Because energy goes into stuff. Adaptation and resilience is more a part of how you plan, encouraging your local agriculture, protecting those open spaces and natural features and wildlife corridors, because those are all a part of resilience, especially when it comes to the increase in precipitation that we're having. You have, the wonderful resources of lakes and waterways. So protecting those in your township is really important. And one of the ways that you can do that is through green infrastructure and native landscaping. But native landscaping is changing because as we get warmer temperatures, different plants will thrive. And then the development of community resilience centers. Do you have resilience centers? Do you have spots, not just your fire safety, but actual resilience centers around? So I would encourage you to incorporate LID, low impact development best practices, in your planning. I know Washtenaw County has just recently upgraded its stormwater, all the calculations and so forth to recognize that the 100-year storm is more intense than it was just a few years ago. And so they've just upgraded those requirements. And we have a lot of implementation tools, but I want to say that education and outreach is important. I don't think planning commissions do as much as they could do, especially around their master plans and engaging their township in these discussions. You have the, zoning and policies and your capital improvements and so forth, but it's really that education and outreach about why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important to the community around climate impact and also the resilience, because there are resources that Eagle has. They've created this whole Catalyst community. They have education programs and a lot of resources that townships and cities can use around this. And I want to just end that, it is ours to protect. And so I thank you for your service, and planning commissions make a huge difference in the communities that they serve. Thank you so much.
Jan, that was great. I enjoyed that very much. You were very helpful with it. Does anybody in the Planning Commission have any questions that you'd like to ask Jan? Yep, George.
Jen, just a question. You talk about planning commissions incentivizing developers. What are some of the examples that you've done in that space?
Yeah, and I think these are the basic ones that different municipalities have tried. And those are, one, density bonuses. And so those are, obviously if you do things like this, you get additional density. And you can tie that into your going above the energy code. You can do those for renewables. And you can do those for exceeding, low impact development standards. exceeding your stormwater, native landscaping, you can put those together. And obviously the PUDs are an important vehicle for using for those standards. The other thing is to work for, I don't know if you have your own plan review or building permitting process and plan review process, but look at those processes, and is there a way that you can expedite? So if someone's going to meet, for example, the zero code, how can you expedite their approvals? Because time is money in development. So basically you're trying to, through incentives, balance the improving your energy efficiency, your renewable energy, balance that with giving them a shorter kind of review process. And other policies, there are some low embodied carbon policies that are out there. And obviously EV charging ordinances are also starting to come. Ann Arbor is exploring whether they can actually ban the extension of gas. They're not sure that it's going through sort of a legal process review right now. But I'll be glad to tell Brian if they do get it passed. It has been passed in I think there are 42 jurisdictions in California right now that have banned the expansion of their gas infrastructure.
Okay, are there any other questions for Jan? Well, Jan, thank you very much. Very informative. I learned a bunch of stuff today I haven't heard before. It's always refreshing to do that. And if we got any questions, we're going to invite you back.
Yeah, and I will forward you Viridian at County Farm Park. You can go to the website, but they have a nice little poster, and it's a really kind of very exciting development. And we actually have a grant request into the DOE to work on smart grid and so forth with it. So it's really what the future of development is. So thank you very much for your time, and thanks for your service.
And thank you for your time too. I appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on. There are no table items, no old business. We have two scheduled public hearings, and we'll start with PSU 21-0, the Space Shop. David?
This is a project that the Planning Commission saw, I think, 2 meetings ago at the conceptual level, and is now being proposed for approval of both the special land use and for the corresponding site plan. This is a project at the southeast corner of M5 and Pontiac Trail. 2 pieces of property, actually. The larger piece of property is currently under private ownership, and the smaller property is owned by the township's DDA. And as you heard from Mr. Winkler, the DDA is in agreement with the prospective developers to sell what they refer to as Parcel K to the developers should this project be approved by the Planning Commission. The proposal is for a 100,000 square foot climate controlled self-storage facility that would have its primary access off of Pontiac Trail. There's no option to have access off of M5. It's a limited access highway. The building would be a 2-story building, and the way they've configured it, they've taken advantage of the grades on the property to have a 2-story building that's still accessible from ground level. Based on the grades of the property, if you have an upper floor unit, you can get to your unit from 2 sides of the building. If you have a ground floor unit, you can get to your unit from the other 2 sides of the building without ever having to use stairs or an elevator. The proposed developer is Stein Group out of Atlanta, Georgia. They've done several of these facilities. This facility is branded as the Space Shop, which is their brand. They would own and operate this facility should it be approved. There's gonna be 700 units inside the self-storage facility. As I mentioned, 2 floors. The property is zoned TLM Technology and Light Manufacturing, and it is within the Haggerty Road corridor overlay. And the fact that it's in the overlay is very relevant because self-storage mini warehouses are not a permitted use in the TLM zoning district. However, they are permitted as a special land use in the Haggerty overlay. This is the same scenario that the Planning Commission saw a couple years ago when Beyond Self-Storage was proposed at the corner of Oakley Park and Haggerty Road. Same situation, TLM-based zoning in the Haggerty Road overlay. And so when those developers wanted that facility approved, they had to seek special land use approval and site plan approval from the Planning Commission for a use that's permitted in the Haggerty overlay. So because it's special land use, that's why a public hearing is required as part of this proposal. Couple things of note, the Planning Commission, when we saw this as a conceptual level, was mostly interested in the building's architecture, building materials, building design, and the appearance of this facility, both from Pontiac Trail and from M5. And so the developers have created an architectural plan that they hope is consistent with the direction that they were given by the Planning Commission. Another thing that's worth discussing tonight is the parking for the facility. If you apply the strict application of the parking standards of our zoning ordinance, they would be required to put in, I think the number is 74 parking spaces, 1 space per unit plus employee parking. So the total is 74. They're proposing to install significantly less. They would like to put in 9 parking spaces and plus an additional 3 that would be specifically dedicated to trailhead parking. We're going to talk about the trail aspect here in a second, or the pathway aspect. So they're asking for the Planning Commission to deviate significantly from the parking standards based on the number of visitors that they expect at this facility. The size of the facility, the number of units they expect would generate about 12 to 15 trips per day. And so obviously a low traffic generator. And the majority of those trips would be customers who are going to their unit and therefore would not be parking right in a front parking field. They would be pulling up to their entrance along one of the 4 sides of the building into the designated loading zones and loading and unloading from there. So they're hoping for Planning Commission's agreement that they don't need to supply 74 parking spaces or anywhere close to it. And that would be a Planning Commission decision that could be incorporated as part of the Planning Commission's motion. Given the site's proximity to the M5 roundabout, the M5 and Pontiac Trail roundabout, this is a location that is going to be a challenge for access, no matter what the proposed use is. Specifically, where the driveway is proposed is on the DDA's parcel K. That's why they needed that property from the DDA is specifically to have an accessible driveway location. But even that location, and I can pull up the aerial if it's helpful, that location would still be along a divided portion of Pontiac Trail where there's the grass median in between the eastbound and westbound lanes of Pontiac Trail. So one of the conversations that we had with the applicant was how traffic that's exiting this facility, how would they go westbound on Pontiac Trail if that's what their destination is? And as part of that conversation, the solution, hopefully the longer range solution, is to have cross access with whatever develops on the properties immediately to the east of Parcel K into the subject property, so that when those properties develop and hopefully when the Rock Road properties develop or redevelop, this facility could have a frontage road connecting its driveway to whatever develops east of it, so that someday, hopefully in the near future, folks exiting this facility who want to go westbound on Pontiac Trail would be able to make a direct left turn via Rock Road. But that's going to be an unknown until Rock Road and the property next door to this facility, until their futures are determined and a development is proposed. That said, the prospective developers are going to work with the property owners, their neighboring property owners, to try to get that cross access sooner rather than later. The last thing I want to mention before I turn it over to the developers for their presentation and before we open the public hearing is a pathway along M5. So what the township wants to see and what's in our non-motorized master plan within our Parks and Recreation plan is for a connection from the newly finished Michigan Airline Trail, connection from that trail all the way up to Pontiac Trail. And from there, getting walkers, bikers, runners across Pontiac Trail to the 5 and Main development and the rest of the DDA development area on the north side of Pontiac Trail, along Martin Parkway. And so this property would be key to creating that connection. What the developers have offered is an easement along their west property line for a pathway. And in conversations with them, I explained to them that the Planning Commission does have the authority to require that they actually install that pathway, not just provide the easement. Recognizing, however, that putting in that pathway just along their property would be a dead-end pathway and would be so for an indefinite period of time, because to make the connection from their property further south to the Michigan Airline Trail is going to need some cooperation from MDOT and from the Federal Highway Administration. And the township is only in the very early portions of getting that cooperation. So it's an unknown when that connection can actually happen. So the recommendation of the planning department is, rather than have the space shop install that pathway, that dead end pathway that may be dead end for an indefinite period of time, rather have them make a contribution to the township's pathway fund in an amount proportionate to what the pathway would cost for them to actually build it. And then the township would hold that money in a fund until such time as we get the cooperation we need from MDOT, from the feds, to actually build the pathway from the Michigan Airline Trail all the way to Pontiac Trail, with about 1,000 feet of it landing on the subject property that we'll be discussing this evening. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions from the Planning Commission. I'll repeat that what they're seeking tonight is special land use approval for a self-storage facility within the Haggerty Road Corridor Overlay, which requires a public hearing. And if they are able to get that, then the next step would be for them to get site plan approval also from the Planning Commission. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions for me. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the developers.
All right, and who's going to speak for the project?
My name is Jason Linscott with Stein Investment Group.
All right, Jason, go right ahead. We'll hear from you first, and then we're going to go to the public hearing after you're done, or unless there's somebody else from your group that needs to speak. Go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Appreciate everyone's time. I will. I want to ask you real quick, because we were here, as Dave said, a couple of sessions ago, and did kind of an introduction to who we are and our product. And I went through some architecture slides. Would you all like me to do that again? I just want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary, Jason. You can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So once again, Jason Linscott from Stein Investor Group in Atlanta. We are real estate developers that develop primarily self-storage and retail, really all over the Mid-Atlantic, Midwest, and Southeast. And as we came to you guys before to introduce this proposal to the Planning Commission, we had taken your feedback and made some changes to our plan. Specifically, we heard that ideally the Planning Commission would like to see the building appear as 2 stories. At the time when we came to you before, it was a 1-story building with kind of a parapet. We have since changed the building to, in fact, 2 stories, particularly from the view from Pontiac Trail. It's a 2-story building. As Mr. Campbell mentioned, the topography on the site is such that it actually rises as you go away from Pontiac Trail. So it's a 2-story building from Pontiac Trail. If you're at the rear of the site, it actually would appear as a 1-story building because the topography rises. So we're able to do that and sort of create a split level building, which is, at least in self-storage, is a really great, is really the best sort of layout we can possibly do. It's the most efficient and the most effective for customers. There you go, thank you. So that is a rendering of the front of the building. You can sort of see as you go back towards the right where the grade kind of goes up and the building becomes 1 story at the rear. So this is how the building presents now. It's 2 stories. Another thing we heard from you all is I think there's some feedback to reduce the green colors. We had some green elements along the sides of the building, and heard that you guys didn't, want us to kind of reduce that. What we've basically done is now just kept it at our awnings, is the only green material on the entire building. So just to give it some color pop and some brand identity. But the rest of the building is brick and hardy materials and some ephes and a lot of glass. We have, and actually, if you wouldn't mind sharing that screen again, I think that was Mr. Campbell. I do want to point out the ephes, because another note I had from the meeting was just sort of a concern about ephes, or maybe a concern about the product. What we've done is the elements that are ephes on this building are just details, so cornice and trim elements up high. It's just an easier product to work with and looks better. You can do more with it. None of the ephes, of course, first of all, the ephes is below the thresholds required by the township's code. So we're underneath any of those requirements. In fact, I think it's a 25% requirement. We're at 24% on the front, and then the other street facing on the side is about 8% ephes, so significantly less. The building's primarily brick and hardy, which are cementitious materials. We do have about 26% glass on the front of the building to try and create an office building kind of appearance. The brick water table kind of goes around the entire building. And all of the ephes, any of the ephes is up towards the top just for decorative materials. You can kind of see it here. It's the sort of fuzzy gray material at the very tops. Everything else, the white area in the middle on the top is hardy. And these are sort of smooth finish panels, look really nice and sort of accent the brick and create a nice mix of materials. And then of course the other areas are glass. And everything else you see is a hardy material, including the kind of louvered looking things in the middle is also hardy. Those are the elements we heard last time from the Planning Commission, which we appreciated, and we took those things and made our changes based on those comments. The only other things I'll mention real quick, I made a couple of notes about environmental stuff, just so you guys know, just relevant to the presentation we just heard. We've looked at all kinds of things. My wife actually works in battery technologies for electric public transportation. We've looked at a lot of this stuff for our self-storage facilities. These facilities are incredibly energy efficient. We use LED lights, everything's on motion sensors. If you think about it, you have a large building here where people don't go in and out very regularly. So you don't have a lot of energy loss in these buildings. You don't have, full glass walls where you got a lot of heat transfer and the sun coming in and that sort of stuff. They're incredibly efficient, and we generally use heat pumps, which is electric heat, where we can. So just as an aside, I made a couple of notes while I was listening to the presentation before. Also, as Mr. Campbell mentioned, we have sort of dedicated a 15-foot easement area along the western border of the site. This is parallel to M5, and that would be for the airline trail connection. As it goes from south to north, on the north end, we have put 3 parking spaces in for the trailhead. These are 3 parking spaces we don't need. These are different than the 9 parking spaces that we do need for the development of our property. So those would just be for trail parking. I think I've pretty much covered everything. Hopefully I didn't go too quick. But if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. And I'm going to ask Jacob there. Do we have people that are here specifically for this public hearing, Jason?
Currently, we don't have anybody from the public with us, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I will open the public hearing and I give this public a chance to speak. If there is no interest in the public from the public, then I will close the public hearing and we'll go to comments on from the board. Let's start with Brian Winkler today. How are you doing, Brian? What do you think about this? And do you have any comments, any questions that you want to ask Jason? Unmute yourself, Brian.
Larry, I think that the petitioner has done a great job in what they presented as far as the exterior elevations. And without exaggeration, as David mentioned in his report, this is a great fit for that particular site, given the proximity to M5 and the fact that it is a low traffic generator. And it's got a very attractive building to boot.
Okay, anything else, Brian? That's it. Sam, what do you got? Any comments?
I think Brian said it all. It's a great project for that space and great fit.
Okay, Chelsea, what about you? Any comments?
Don't have anything additional.
Nothing going on there. Okay, Brian Perrell.
Hey, Larry. I could go through everything, but I agree with, I guess they were originally Brian's comments and Sam seconded them. The only thing that I had a question about is in regard to the dumpster. I think I read in the planning director's report that there's not going to be a dumpster, David, and that they would handle it, through regular waste service, I guess the regular bins. My only question maybe to either you or the petitioner is what happens in the event that someone cleans out, one of their units or decides, I know at these places, sometimes people, dump mattresses and things like that.
I asked those very same questions to the petitioner, and I'm going to let Jason answer, but I think what the answer is that when they provide a dumpster, they actually encourage that kind of activity. But I'll let Jason answer that better than I can.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. And that's exactly right. When we put a dumpster in, that sort of does and encourages that activity. We don't ever have dumpsters at our properties for that reason, and we really don't have any issues either with folks dumping things. Truthfully, we've never had that type of issue. We do have 2 employees on site, and we have cameras. The building's very secure, so we know who's coming and going. So if you have a unit there, you have a code, and we know when you come and go because you put your code in to go in your unit. Of course, there's cameras as well. So so we haven't really had those types of issues with people dumping things. To be honest with you, the worst thing that usually happens is when someone doesn't want their things, they just stop paying. You have to deal with it. But it's in their unit, and it's not anything that the town would necessarily know is going on. So hopefully that answers your question.
The one recommendation I offered on the dumpster question is if ever it is determined at some point in the future that they do need a dumpster, that they need administrative site plan approval to put it in. In other words, they can't just drop a dumpster on the pavement and call it good. They would have to put it inside in an enclosure to match the building as anyone else would, and that would need administrative site plan approval.
Makes sense. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
George?
Dave, is it possible to pull up the aerial and maybe near map or property gateway? Because I do, first of all, it just as Brian and others have said, I think this is a perfect fit for that site. And I think the elevations you presented are exactly what we asked for and look great. But would help me to understand the potential easement that you were talking about, Dave, along or to the east of that property. And is it envisioned, I guess in my question is it envisioned that people exiting the facility will only be able to turn east and not try to figure out how to turn west?
So I will, first off, can everybody see the aerial?
Yes.
Okay, and I chose the one from March because there's no foliage and it makes these driveways easier to see. So this is where I'm moving my cursor. This is the larger property. And then this smaller piece is the DDA owned property. And what's key about this piece is its existing curb cut right here. And the reason this is significant is if you look where this existing curb cut is, it's actually on the portion of Pontiac Trail that is still divided by the slip lane, the northbound to eastbound slip lane, and the eastbound lane of Pontiac Trail. So there's this median in between, and there's actually kind of a hump to this thing. So if you wanted to come in from this driveway, your real only legal and safe option would be to come in from northbound M5 and get onto this eastbound slip lane and come in this way. Whereas this driveway on the DDA parcel K actually gives access from both lanes of Pontiac Trail. Now, when I talk about cross access, this is the property that's undeveloped and is not owned by the prospective developers. And then this is Rock Road. Now, if you look at Rock Road, this is the first point where you can actually make a legal left turn out onto westbound M5.
So Dave, that parcel where it looks like it's for runoff, the parcel between where you are and Rock Road. Nope, the one to the east of that piece.
So that's actually part of this
Okay.
property. But you're right, that is the detention pond for at least this site and maybe some of the other properties along Rock Road. So to get some sort of a driveway from about here over to here somewhere would require some cooperation from at least 2 property owners and almost certainly some reconfiguration of that detention pond.
And if I may interject real quick, David, we actually, when we had looked at this, we sort of were thinking it might make sense, and if we can in the future work with the property owner to actually access it a little further to the south, maybe avoid that pond area right through there. Yeah, so they have an existing access road through there, and then the other areas on the site, that we could potentially access one day.
The other thing, and we're still waiting to hear from the road commission on this, is if we go west and look at the kind of corresponding median on the other side of Pontiac Trail, the other side of the roundabout, they've got this dedicated turnaround right before you get to the nose of the median. And so I'll be curious to see whether the road commission is going to say that there's an obligation that something like that get installed, right about here where I'm moving my cursor. And if that were required, then that would be where you could make a legal U-turn in the median.
Okay, that's helpful. It's a concern, but it's not one that would sway. I still think this is the right development for that piece of property, but the safety issue with that traffic, trying to figure that out in the shorter term versus longer term, I think should be a priority for all of us. That's all I have.
That's it. Okay, Bill, anything you want to add?
I believe everything's been covered.
All right, well, I've got a couple points that I'd like to go over. One is the mechanicals hidden on the roof. I want to make sure that that's covered, that we don't see these mechanicals. Jason, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, sir. So we don't put any mechanicals on the roof on these storage facilities. They'll actually be on the ground, and they'll be hidden from sight. So they will be screened and more towards the back of the building. The reason we don't put anything on the roofs is we don't need large air handlers because they are very energy efficient buildings. So they're really more like residential sized units. They're pretty small. They're actually exactly like residential sized units. So pretty small units, they go on the ground, and we generally we try not to put any penetrations in the roof at all. Because if you have a unit in there and you have a very small leak in there and you don't visit your things for 6 or 9 months, nobody might know there was a leak, So generally we're trying to keep no penetrations in the roof.
All right, these units on the ground will be landscaped so we don't look at them and see them and all that. Okay.
Correct.
One of the couple other things that I have is the lighting. I want to make sure that the lighting doesn't reflect down onto M5 in any way, shape, or form. We have a couple places in the township where that has in fact happened, and I want to make sure that you understand this lighting will not interfere with the traffic on M5.
Okay, understood.
Okay. Now, a ticklish point that I have, and I wish you well, but sometimes these things don't work out. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Dave and I discussed today is what happens if you discontinue this facility. And David, you and I talked about the parking situation on there. You said there was adequate parking if they should cease to exist as a self-storage facility and the building is converted to something else.
Well, I said I think there's adequate space for additional parking. This is a big site. And I did talk to the developers about this, and they can speak more to the likelihood of this facility ever becoming obsolete or ever getting retrofitted. But what I'm suggesting is, as a condition of site plan approval, that they provide an alternate parking plan that shows where they could put additional parking on this site if ever this building were to be retrofitted into some sort of a light industrial or a research and development facility.
Okay, thank you. Now, David, you and I discussed many things this morning about this, And I probably will bring them back up just so they're part of the record and that everybody has heard them and that it's into the minutes. We have this easement for the trail. And we're going to make sure that they contribute into the trail fund for that. And I want to know who's going to maintain this trail.
Because this is a unique section of trail, potentially, it would cross a portion of private property, the project that we're talking about this evening, but then would kind of swing out into MDOT right of way and then connect to the Michigan Airline Trail. And because it is such a key connection, my hope and my expectation is that the Michigan Airline Trail Coalition would maintain this particular section in addition to the main spine of the Michigan Airline Trail.
Okay, and this donation, we'll call it whatever, the funding of the trail, where would that be held?
Where would it be held?
Where would the funds be held?
In my savings account. I'm teasing, of course. I shouldn't joke like that. People go to jail for stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. I'll come visit you.
The township has a dedicated pathway fund specifically for this purpose. And if the developers are agreeable to that contribution per a condition of the Planning Commission, which it sounds like that's why you're asking, then their funds would be deposited into that pathway fund. And we would likely communicate with the developer whenever the day comes that we go to use those funds so that they understand that that money is being utilized and that it's being utilized for its intended purpose. In other words, it's not anyone's intent to use that money to go buy an ambulance or go put in a playground somewhere. It's specifically for a pathway at this location.
All right, you got to give me a second here. Seeing that I don't have any written notes, I have to go through all this on the computer. So just give me a moment, please.
And I've had some.
Larry, while you're looking at your notes, maybe a question for Dave. And Larry, I think that was a great observation on what if this site gets sold to a non-storage tenant or new owner. Is it feasible to put within the condition that if it is sold to a non-storage owner, that that Jason and his company needs to bring the property up to the ordinance standard for the number of parking spaces?
You're welcome to make that. I don't know if you're asking me, Mr. Weber, but you're welcome to make that a condition. I will tell you that if that day were to ever come, that's the township's standard procedure per our zoning ordinances. When a new use is proposed for an existing facility, it's staff's job and potentially the planning commission's job to ensure that the site is compatible with the new proposed use.
Okay, then I withdraw my comment. Thank you.
I'm still looking through this thing, and on the computer, it's not. Did you all get a packet with all this material in it?
Electronically.
Electronically, okay. I'm not the only one struggling through this. I think those are the major points that I wanted to bring up.
I do want to mention that we do have we still are in a open public hearing. I don't know that we have any public.
No, I closed it. I opened and closed it.
Okay.
I'm one step ahead of you this time.
All right.
Did we need to make a motion to close the public hearing?
No,
Okay.
not in the past. We haven't.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's two, I'm repeating myself, there's two items for consideration. The first is consideration by the Planning Commission of the special land use. And then if action is taken on that, then the corresponding action would be the site plan.
Okay, so here's how I see that I can't get to this in my computer right now. Chelsea, I'm going to put you on the spot and see if you'll make an motion here. What I would like to do is to listen to the motion, have it seconded, and then open it for discussion against once we see all the criteria on the motion, if we want to add something to it. Is that agreeable, everybody? Of course it is. Chelsea, go right ahead.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve PSU 21-01, a special land use for Stein Investment Company to allow the space shop within the Haggerty Road Corridor Overlay District on 2 vacant properties at the southeast corner of Pontiac Trail and M5. Special land use approval is based on a finding that the applicant has demonstrated to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission that the proposed use complies with the standards for special land use approval within section 34.08 of the zoning ordinance for a climate-controlled self-storage use in the HRC overlay district. Special land use approval is based on the following conditions. 1, approval of a corresponding site plan by the Planning Commission. 2, no outdoor storage at any time. And 3, any other conditions as determined by the Planning Commission. I don't know that we have any at this time.
Okay. Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second it. McKeever.
McKeever is seconded. Okay, I'm going to open this first for any more discussion. Is there any more discussion that you want to ask now that you heard the motion? Dave, I think some of the things that we talked about earlier today will come up in the site plan approval. So
If there's thoughts about architecture, landscaping, lighting, those are more applicable to the site plan, correct?
okay. So is there anybody that wishes to speak more on this? If not, we'll go ahead with the roll call vote. Deb, it's to you.
Reback,
Aye.
McKeever,
Aye.
Harold,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Kareem,
Aye.
Winkler,
Aye.
Haber.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. We will move over to the site plan approval and the site plan. If there's anything more you want to ask of Jason about this. Anybody else have any questions? I think let's do this the same way. Let's hear the motion, and then we'll comment on it after. This is a little different than we usually do it, but I think it'll work out better in this particular instance. So, Sam, how would you like to do this one?
Oh, my God.
Don't panic. We'll help you through it, Sam.
You got me in there.
Dave, maybe what page is the site plan on?
It's on
We
57.
provided recommended
157.
motion.
57.
Oh, I was gonna say page 9 in my report. Is that, what page is it?
57 of the 57 of the PDF.
Thank you.
It's going to take me a second to get there too, so hang on. I don't see any numbers on these pages. Did you find it yet, Sam?
I did find it, page 57.
Okay, then go right ahead. I'm not there yet, but just go on with it.
It's, I'll read it. It's 2021-031 pin agenda pickup for Jason. Planning Department recommendation site plan. Should the Planning Commission opt to approve the proposed site plan for Steen Investment Company, the Space Shop, the Planning Department offers the following notions, language for the Commission's consideration. It's moved to approve site plan number PSP 21-02 at 100,000 square foot, 2-story climate controlled self-storage facility for Steen Investment Company, the Space Shop to be located on 2 vacant properties at the southeast corner of Pontiac Trail and M5. Site plan approval is based upon a finding by the Planning Commission that the proposed development is consistent with the applicable development standard of Article 35 of the Commerce Township zoning ordinance, and those within Article 18 applicable for a new commercial developments within the Haggerty Road Corridor Overlay District. The Planning Commission further finds that the proposed parking is an appropriate deviation from the application of the minimum parking standards of Article 28 of the zoning ordinance, given the nature of the proposed use, and that no dumpster and dumpsters enclosure shall be required. Site plan approval is subject to the following conditions. 1, review and approval of engineered construction plans by the township engineer, fire marshal, road commission for Auckland County, RCOC, and building department. 2, a contribution into dedicated pathway fund in lieu of construction of pathway along the subject properties and 5-foot frontage in an amount proportionate to the cost of construct said pathway as agreed upon by the developer, township engineer, and planning director. 3, review and administrative approval of a revised site plan that includes a cross-access easement connecting the site's proposed driveway to the vacant property adjacent to the east. B, reorientations of the proposed front parking area to ensure the parking space do not encroach on the minimum front setback. C, a dumpster enclosure matching the materials of the proposed building to be administratively reviewed and approved if ever determined to be necessary. D, mechanical and utility equipment to be adequately screened. 4, a land combinations application to be reviewed and approved administratively to create a new legal descriptions and parcel ID number for the single property. 5, sign to be reviewed and approved under a separate sign permit by building department subject to the requirements of Article 30 of the zoning ordinance. 6, any other conditions which the planning commission deem necessary.
Okay,
That's it.
I got you into a real good one for the first one that you've done. You and Chelsea did great.
Thank
And
you.
And I
Yeah.
want to promise the two of you that I will pick on you again. So I just wanted you to know that. Jason, Scott, I want to ask you a question that I should have asked you before and I did not.
Larry, do you want to get a second on that before you discuss?
Yes, you can do that. Do we have a second?
I'd second that, Larry.
All right, Brian.
Thank
second.
you.
All right, Jason, here's the question. Are you in discussion with the people to the east about this access? What have you talked about? Where does it stand at this point?
No, we have not had discussions with them yet about access. I think the concept here was that we would, is there sort of a natural place that it lines up in the site plan? And that we would, and we've done this actually in other projects where we provide a cross-access easement so that it can be connected to either by them or by us, through our property so that there's a right to do it. But certainly it only helps our business to have that additional access. So it's certainly a positive thing that we would.
Yeah, one of the real problems that I have, and I guess I'm opening a discussion on this, and the rest of you can join in a minute, is that I have some serious considerations about the access into on the Pontiac Trail there. People come flying through there at about 300,000 miles an hour, and I'm kind of concerned that there's going to be accidents. One of the things you got going for is this is not going to be a lot of ingress and egress out of the facility. And that's one reason that I'm looking at this and thinking that it's not a bad idea. But we still, if we can get that access off the Rock Road, well, that would make me really smile a lot. That's and I was under the assumption that you people were talking to the landowners there, but apparently I was wrong on that.
Right, we have not been going back and forth. I think we had reached out to them about something else and hadn't had much. Response time was not quick. Something that we're interested in working on too. And you're right, it is a low traffic generation use, of course, which is one of the reasons we thought it was a good fit for the site as well. It's pretty low trips per day, and it's not a convenience thing. It's a destination. So folks generally, when they come to our facility, they know where they're going. So it's not oh, look at there's a drugstore and they turn real quick and it's convenience type stuff.
If this was another type of facility, any other use, I would not approve it at all, period. Under these circumstances, at least you got your foot in the door so far, so that's always good. All right, so let me open this up to everyone again. Bill, I'll start with you this time because I picked on the other people first before. What do you got? Any questions that you want to ask about the site plan?
I do not, Larry.
All right, George.
No, I think we've discussed everything that I had before.
Okay, Brian, Carol.
Hey, Larry, I'm good. You know, just kind of a thought starter. I know we talked about it, I think, last time, but I'm still, I appreciate that the petitioner came in with a great design, and the amount of EFS they're using on the building is limited, and it's under our minimum request. But I still am not a fan of the material, and I guess I would just like to see in the future. I think we're too far on this one. I would like to see us do something as a group.
Well, I think we need to change the ordinance totally. I think we need to look at it and just change the ordinance. That'll solve the problems.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Brian?
I'm good. That's it.
All right. Before we go on, obviously, the only way to get into this facility is off of northbound M5. And I think we need a sign. This is going to sound crazy, but people will not do this. I know there's a medium there for to go over, but we're going to need a sign there. It specifically says right turn only. And somehow, I mean, I see what goes on at Walmart where it's a right turn only getting out of there. And I have trouble going left, and I try it all the time. So I want to make sure that nobody tries to go over that median. So we're going to need some kind of sign there. Okay, go ahead.
You're saying for outbound traffic?
Outbound, yes.
Yeah. I'm
Trust me,
guessing
people are gonna
I'm guessing the developer will be agreeable to installing a right turn only sign outbound.
People will try it. I guarantee you they're going to try to go over that medium. If they don't see it, then they'll try to go over it.
Okay, understood.
Okay, Brian Perrell, you were done. Is that correct? All right, Chelsea, do you have anything you want to comment on?
I don't have anything to add.
Very good. Okay, Brian Winkler.
Nothing to add, Larry.
Okay, now I'm looking for volunteers for a motion.
We already made the motion. We're in discussion.
So we're in discussion. Yeah, I'll figure that out at some point. Don't worry about it. All right, is any further discussion? None. Deb, it's to you.
Kareem,
Say it again.
Sam, Kareem,
Aye.
thank you. Carol? You're muted, but I saw you nod.
Try
Thank
again.
you, Brian. Okay, Weber,
Aye.
Winkler,
Brian Winkler.
I'm sorry. Aye.
Hi.
thank you. McKeever,
Aye.
Reback,
Aye.
Haber.
Aye. Congratulations, Jason. When are you planning on getting started with this, and how long do you think it's going to take you to do it?
Well, first of all, thank you all, and I appreciate the input and the back and forth discussion. It's a good process. We would probably start this in late summer, and it takes about 10 to 12 months to complete.
Good luck.
Hopefully open by next summer.
We'll welcome you to the community.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, well, then we're going to move on to item number H2, which is PSU 21-02 Jiffy Lube. This will also be a special land use, and this will also be a public hearing. So David, if you'd like to get things rolling here, we can move on with this.
Sure. So what's being proposed this evening is for a portion of the existing parking lot for the Commerce Township Meyer store, which is at 1703 Haggerty, on the west side of Haggerty Road, just north of Crum Road. A portion of that parking lot, a surplus portion of that parking lot, would be split off from the Meyer property and sold to the Jiffy Lube Group for them to develop a new Jiffy Lube oil change and minor car repair facility on a newly created piece of property. That newly created piece of property would be a little over half an acre. It would not have any new points of access onto Haggerty Road. They would instead share the existing driveway and internal roadway and driveway network that Meyer already has. The building would be 3,000 square feet and some change. I can't find the number in front of me. Would have 4 bays for drive-through automotive service. As I mentioned, primarily oil changes, but they also do work with batteries and some tire work as well. My understanding, and I know the Jiffy Lube team can explain this better than I can, my understanding is that this is not the type of service where you drop off your car in the morning and then come pick it up at the end of the day, or even drop your car off at night and they get working on it in the morning and you come back 24 hours later to get it. Instead, it's the type of service where you actually sit in your car while it's being worked on, or you go inside and sit in the lobby. And I think that's relevant to their site plan, because they are not proposing a huge area for cars to be stored in while they either await service or while they await their owner to come retrieve them, which is what you see in, say, the Bell Tires of the world. You see a lot of cars that are waiting for, like I say, either someone to pick them up or waiting to go inside for service. The entire Meyer property is zoned B3, general commercial, and an automobile service center, such as what Jiffy Lube is proposing, is a special land use in the B3 zoning districts. And specifically, it's a special land use when it's incorporated as part of a larger shopping center. So a lot of times you'll see where Walmart or I guess Kmart back in their time actually had an automotive service component as part of their larger shopping center. And so this would be comparable to that concept where, you know, Meyer's not going to own the Jiffy Lube or operate the Jiffy Lube, but it would be part of kind of the Meyer campus. It would be just north of the Meyer gas station as well, and would actually serve shared access driveways and interior drives with the Meyer gas station. And in looking at that bigger Meyer campus, one of the conversations that I had with the applicant's design team, multiple conversations, was the potential for a sidewalk along the Haggerty Road frontage of not just Jiffy Lube, because Jiffy Lube wouldn't actually have any Haggerty frontage, but a sidewalk along the entirety of Meyer's frontage. If you remember, currently under construction is a independent living facility that the Planning Commission approved, I think 2 years ago now, Rolling Hills. So that's on the south side of Crum Road, west side of Haggerty. They are putting in a sidewalk along their Haggerty Road frontage. And the road commission is requiring that they actually put a receiving ramp on the north side of Crum Road, so that folks who are using the sidewalk on their frontage actually have a place to go to when they cross Crum Road. So a logical extension of what the Rolling Hills project is already doing is now to take that receiving ramp that's already going to land on Meyer's gas station property and extend that sidewalk along the Meyer frontage and get it that much closer to our goal of having connection, non-motorized connection from Maple Road all the way up to Pontiac Trail with the Michigan Airline Trail in between. Once we establish those type of connections, then we really do have a pretty significant trailway network building. So part of what's being proposed tonight is not just a special land use for Jiffy Lube and not just a site plan for Jiffy Lube, but you're also amending the Meyer site plan. And so what the Planning Commission oftentimes does when a site plan is being amended is bring that site plan up into reasonable compliance with what would be required if that site plan were proposed today. So if a new Meyer store were proposed along Haggerty Road today, it would be required that they'd have to put a sidewalk in along Haggerty Road. So now that this is a significant amendment to the Meyer site plan that was approved back in, I think, 1991, the Planning Commission has the option to require a sidewalk along Meyer's frontage. Bear with me while I just flip through and make sure there's nothing that I should be touching on that I'm not remembering. You know, we talked a lot about traffic with the prior project, the self-storage facility. We did not require a traffic study for the Jiffy Lube proposal. One, because as I mentioned, they're not requiring any new access. And two, because the traffic to be generated by Jiffy Lube is expected to be relatively nominal in comparison to the amount of traffic that's already being generated by a Meyer store. I did talk to the developers design team today about the landscaping out along Haggerty Road. So when the Meyer project got approved 30 something years ago, they were required to put in landscaping along Haggerty Road. That landscape is now, 30 years mature, and there may be a temptation for Jiffy Lube to either remove or do some significant pruning of that existing mature landscaping along Haggerty Road that Meyer put in. So one of the suggestions for site plan approval, if the Planning Commission opts for that this evening, is for Jiffy Lube to, make a determination of what they want to do to the existing landscaping along Haggerty Road, and be required to submit a revised landscape plan that shows how they're going to replace any plantings that they want to try to take down along Haggerty Road. But in general, the Planning Commission should keep in perspective that what's there now is a unused asphalt parking lot that is an invitation for the clothing donation bins that none of us like, or for people to store vehicles for long periods of time. And this is prospectively an opportunity to bring that area into a more productive use with a Jiffy Lube facility, with more landscaping than what we currently have, which is to say zero landscaping on the existing parking lot. So procedurally comparable to the project we just saw with self-storage with the space shop, they would need site plan approval for an automobile service center in the B3 zoning district. And if the Planning Commission opts to grant that, then the corresponding consideration would be for site plan approval for a new building and the surrounding landscaping on a new piece of property to be carved out of the Meyer site. So I'll take a pause there, see if there's any questions for me. Otherwise, I know Matthew Pisco, representing Jiffy Lube, hopes to make their own presentation. And like I said, unless there's any question for me, I'll turn it over to Matthew. And remind the Planning Commission that we do need to hold a public hearing for this project.
We will do that. Matthew, would you like to comment?
Dave, I just have a question for you. Is Jiffy Lube purchasing this property from Meyer, and will this lot be subdivided and into its own parcel?
That is my understanding, that they're creating a separate parcel that they will buy from Meyer, assuming they get the approvals that they need from the township. And so part of, if you look at our recommended motion, I hope that one of the conditions of approval is, have it on here, that they go through the land division process.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, Matthew, are you unmuted? And we'd like to get you a picture on there if we can see you.
Through the chair, if I can, I'd like to share screens. I do not have a camera, but I do have lots of pretty pictures to look at. If you can see my screen now, while I go through the very brief presentation on the actual Jiffy Lube operations, just wanted to give you an overall view of the shopping center. This is where we're proposing to place it, between the gas station and the small shops in front of the Meyer grocery store.
Matthew, I don't think we're seeing your screen if you're trying to share it.
All right, let me try it. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your patience. Anyhow, this is the parcel, when you look at the site at large, where we're proposing, and we'll continue internal access, but to Mr. Campbell's point, there are no new access points. So I'm going to reduce this, and I'll show this is a smaller version, the existing vacant or underutilized parking and the proposed unit. And I'll leave that up to do that while I talk about the macro operations and of Jiffy Lube. Jiffy Lube International is a wholly owned subsidiary of Royal Dutch Shell. They have 2,200 franchise locations across the United States. They're making a push to increase density and are actually company developed stores. So this is a really big push in 15 communities in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York State. So this is a national Midwest program that's well underway. We'd love to, with your blessing, to start construction on this and have it open this year. In a micro sense, the project, Meyer came to Jiffy Lube specifically because of what Mr. Campbell had brought up so adroitly about our use being complementary to their vacant parking spaces and is low intensity, between 5 and 6 cars an hour for our business day, which is 7 a.m. where we start and open the store until 8 at nighttime. So it's really kind of a short duration day operation. As far as the operations of the Jiffy Lube itself, it is a multi-care center. No appointments are required, unlike some the tire change places that require you to schedule an appointment. The multi-care moniker is consistent with regular interval maintenance, an alternative choice for consumers. Typical services are oil changes and lube, which is their primary service, vehicle inspections, filter changes, fluid changes, battery replacements, brakes, exterior glass, and suspension work. Typical service is 30 to 120 minutes. We have a very nice vestibule for the patrons to wait. There is no overnight parking of these automobiles. People will pull up into queue. One of the service techs will drive it either into the bay facilities or into the on-grade bays. They'll choose their service, and they will, when the service is done, the techs will pull the car on the exit side of the store, and the patrons will pay their bill, get in their car, and depart the service. There's no outdoor storage materials. The location will have its own spill prevention control and countermeasure plan. In other words, a pollution incidents protection plan per the stores. There are 2 bays that have a basement for the pits. In that pit, that's where the fluids, whether they're the old oil or the new fluids, there are no floor drains in the basement. Shell, being a publicly traded large company, is environmentally responsible and, quite honestly, quite paranoid about spills and things of that nature. So the basement is so watertight. We had one float in Brunswick, Ohio, in a horrific rainstorm several months ago while under construction. So these are watertight. And then there's an oil water separator before the last structure leaving, just in case there was a surface spill, which is unlikely. Deliveries and waste reclamation are performed during open hours. Lots of times there's noise concern issues with the compressor. The compressor is in an enclosure in the basement and is quiet enough that we don't have to wear ear protection per OSHA standards. So it's pretty quiet. It doesn't migrate outdoors of the bays. It has 4 to 6 employees per shift, one of them being the shift manager. So we have 9 spaces that are, in the Meyer parking lot, and we consider the intake side of the bays to be parking spaces because that's essentially where the service commences. Lighting is, again, we go dark at 8 p.m. So we'll just go to dark sky on the building, not to attract customers to close business. That's the operations. I will, through the chair, should I show the building elevation now or wait for the site?
No, we're going to do these together.
Okay.
So just go ahead and do that.
Are there any questions on the before and after? If not, I'll move on to the elevation. This is Haggerty Road, if you can imagine, is out here. I know there's some concerns about the lack of windows. We can certainly add windows to this elevation facing Haggerty. But we've landscaped quite a bit around the premises. The notion of augmenting landscaping in the front on Haggerty Road, we don't have the benefit of a monument sign. And we are behind quite mature plants here. If we can look at that administratively, if we can augment plants or replant, I just haven't talked to Meyer about that yet, so I really don't have an answer. But we're open to that because certainly we're not going to have great visibility, but that's okay. People will figure out we're there. So this is the building elevation. If you'd like to look at technical drawings, I can certainly pull up the architectural drawings. But this is a stone base, then a roll lock, then brick, then a soldier course, and then ephes to be the backing for the signs. And listening to the previous presentation, I know you're not big fans of ephes, and we will maintain the percentages required for ephes. Another point was the sidewalk. We have absolutely no objection to installing the sidewalk. We intend on being good neighbors and would be glad to do that. And with that, as it relates to the special use criterion, I think we are in compliance with the 8 criterion. And as it relates to the site plan motion that was written, we have no objections as stated. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'm at your disposal.
All right, Matthew, is there anything else you wanted to add before we move on?
Other than thank you for keeping us safe in this environment and providing an avenue to continue moving projects along. It's much appreciated.
All right, well, with that, then we'll have questions. We may have some further questions for you after the public hearing. We're going to open the public hearing now. Jacob, is anybody here interested in the public hearing?
We currently have no members of the public with us, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, then I'll close the public hearing and we'll go to discussions with our commissioners. Brian Winkler, you want to start? Is there any questions that you have about this? Whether it be site plan or special land use, we're going to do them both together.
You know, Larry, I have one question, and this might be considered a dumb question, but it's for the petitioner. How do they store the used oil at this site? Is it a above ground tank? Is it a below ground tank? How do you dispose of that or store that oil?
Through the chair, if I can, Commissioner Winkler, they're above ground tanks regulated by LARA Fire Department for the state of Michigan. So they're whatever our SPCC plan gets approved, those are the types of tanks that we'll use. So everything is within the confines of the basement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Larry, I really have no major questions about this development. The sidewalk, and then the need to decrease the amount of ephes on the facades, as David has mentioned in his report, would take care of any concerns I have. But I would want to mention to the petitioner that when you increase the amount of brick on the building, I would suggest that you don't do it arbitrarily and just put it right up to the 25% maximum for ephes, but do it in a way that complements the architecture of your building as you've already designed it.
Point taken.
Okay. Chelsea, do you have any comments?
No, I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay. Sam, anything?
I don't have anything to add at this time. Look at the elevation, it looks good.
Okay. Brian Perrell.
Thanks, Larry. At first, before seeing the renderings, I was really concerned about the overhead doors and their visibility from mainly Haggerty Road. I guess a couple things about that. Dave, I think we're planning on handling a lot of landscaping administratively. My position would be, I want the overhead doors covered as much as possible. I really, if it was up to me, you wouldn't see them from Haggerty Road. And I don't know how that's accomplished with existing and new.
We will certainly take a look at that when we're looking at a landscape plan. I mean, obviously with this type of use, they have to have the overhead doors and they have to have them on both sides because it is a drive-through type of operation. And it's difficult to make those invisible in the sense that, this particular site is surrounded by Meijer and by the retail plaza to the north. So, typically what we do is we require that they can't face Haggerty Road because we don't want them to be that prominent where the overhead doors are facing the main road. But in this case, we will certainly look at the landscape plan and come up with any solutions we can to minimize the visibility of the overhead doors.
Yeah, and that wasn't so much of a question. I mean, I guess I appreciate that, and I know you will, and thank you. And in fairness to the petitioner, my next comment was going to be in regard to, and if I misread this in the planning director's report, I apologize. But I think the request is for signage on all four sides of the building. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to me that initially that sounded a little bit obnoxious. But I guess my position would be that I understand that they're trying to do business there. They're trying to attract folks to the Jiffy Lube. And again, my position would be that I would actually be okay with that as long as they did a better job working administratively with you, Dave, to landscape and screen those overhead doors.
Sure. If I could jump in quick, the signage issue is already something that's scheduled for the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for later this month. So Mr. McKeever, in his role as the Planning Commission's liaison to the ZBA, is going to see this project again, specifically for that question of the additional wall signs.
Excellent. And I guess, again, my only comment 2 times in a row is EFS. Just not a fan. I wish we could do better.
Brian, I feel the same way you do. Dave, can you get that on our agenda at some point where we can discuss that? And maybe it comes up every time, and every time we have to address it, I think it's time to either put it to rest. So can you look into that, please?
I will look into it, yes. But you're correct, or someone was correct earlier when the best way to address that is to amend the zoning ordinance for the percent of EFS that we allow in our various zoning districts.
Yeah, okay.
Larry, on that point, this petitioner, maybe we're working with Mr. McKeever and the ZBA, but on that point, to me, the EFS that stands out on this building is on the east side of the building that faces Haggerty. And obviously that's the most visible area of the building or side of the building. Maybe we, I don't know, now that I look at it, the front of it also has a lot of it, but maybe we consider that the east side of the building, if they are going to get 4 signs, maybe the east side doesn't have any EFS on it. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, well, Brian, I'm pretty much on the same place that you are with the signs. I think 4 signs is overkill. I don't think it needs to be done. We haven't allowed it anywhere else in the township that I'm aware of. So Bill McKeever, take heed. We don't want 4 signs. We only want 1 sign or 2
Well,
at the most.
If it meets the criteria, it meets the criteria. Unfortunately, I don't believe it will, but I'll wait to see the presentation.
Okay.
If I can say one more thing, and I know I'm butting in a lot here, but I think this question of the EFS and the signage are kind of interrelated questions, because the amount of EFS might, depend on how much signage the ZBA allows them. So what my approach would be, or my suggested approach would be, let's see how things go with the zoning board of appeals and what signage they are allowed to have. And then once that's determined, that would probably drive how we handle the amount of ephes on the building.
Works for me.
And I would just say, I guess it's on the north end of that building. Now, looking at this rendering that's on the screen, the area that's over the overhead doors, to me, with all that ephes, kind of looks like vacant storefront with no signs on it, which I don't love that look.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm all set, Mr. Hager.
Does anybody have any suggestions as far as that is concerned? We got a couple architects here. As far as the ESAs, and you're talking about, Brian, you were talking about on the west side of the building or the north side? North
It's the I guess it would be the
where
northwest
overhead
side.
doors are, yeah, that's the.
Yeah.
So, anybody, Brian, you want to come in here and help me out? Because I don't like it either particularly.
I'll defer to Samir on this one.
You ducked that question really quick. All right, Samir, he's put you on a hot seat. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's too much ephes in there, but
Right.
I'm not against having some ephes. You know, you need to have it to make that coloring on the building or that variety on the elevation. But yeah, it looks like there's a lot, especially on Haggerty side. Yeah.
Well, I'm not an ESA's fan at all, so you know I could eliminate it all if you people come up with to some kind of situation that will allow us to get rid of the ephes or make it the imprint of the ephes smaller. Any suggestions? All right, you guys think about it for a second. I'm going to move over to George because I know he always comes up with good stuff.
Well, for better or worse for the petitioner, this is in my wheel space. And I will say I've spent quite a bit of time at their offices down in Houston and did find Jiffy Lube to be a good company and a well-run company. A little bit of a concern with this being a multi-care facility, and it wasn't clear to me the size of the dumpster. But if you're going to be in this multi-care, I should say, where you're going to be doing brakes, suspension, tires, batteries, I just want to make sure that there is zero outside storage, particularly for things like batteries and tires, where they need to get picked up by a recycler or something of that nature. So Mr. Pisco, could you just talk a little bit about that on where all the excess or the takeoff parts will be stored?
Yeah, we're cognizant of the concern about outside storage in earlier conversations with planning staff. So we're making that nothing will be stored outside of the building nor visible. This is a trash enclosure, which is completely closed, and it is larger than a traditional trash enclosure. But this is where drum storage is stored within the confines of the trash enclosure, which is 6 feet high and will be screened ad nauseum. But these are storage activities. These are traditional dumpsters for trash and recyclables. Here, these are the push bollards, so it doesn't go through, and then used filters and used drums for oil are stored in this as well.
And Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was talking to Irwing, your predecessor on this project, and asked him about used tires, and the way he described it to me was the used tires that come off the vehicle go right back on the rack where the new tires that are going on the vehicle had been. So in other words, there would never be a need for any outdoor storage of used tires.
God bless him. Irwin was honest, forthright, and correct, Mr. Campbell. There's no outside storage of tires. I was remiss, and this is the floor plan. These are the 4 bays. If you can imagine, the first 2 bays closest to the vestibule and the lobbies for the patrons. This is where the oil change and the pits are. And this is where all the underground lube equipment is stored. This is a slab on grade. And as far as suspension parts, there isn't heavy suspension work done, Trustee Weber. It's essentially perhaps alignments, rotations, wheel changes, things of that nature, brakes. Nothing. There's not wholesale suspension reconstruction.
And as you, just to reiterate, so I know obviously you're all makes. So in your ability to store the parts needed is not going to be feasible at all times. And I just want to make sure that there will be no outside vehicle storage overnight, because you don't have the parts to do a specific repair and the vehicle's already torn down. That's correct?
That is absolutely correct. That's antithetical to our operations. We service while they wait. And there may be a circumstance where we don't have the parts and we can't service the vehicle, and they'll have to come back or find another place. So we're not going to start a vehicle service and leave them stranded. That's not how we operate.
Maybe the last question I had, you mentioned that, so I know the historical model is or has been 100% franchisees. You mentioned that you used the term company developed. Does that also mean company owned?
It's a hybrid, if you can. Jiffy Lube is developing these, and they have a preferred franchisee that handles a vast majority of their operations. But these will be, the franchisee is a wholly owned subsidiary of Jiffy Lube, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Royal Dutch Shell. So if you can imagine, they still have a lot of influence over the operations.
Okay, but there won't be a local franchisee.
No.
Okay. Mr. Haber, those are the only questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Pisco.
Okay.
I guess maybe just to reiterate, I completely agree with the previous comments regarding the EFS and the signage. My personal view is only signage on the Haggerty Road side, no EFS on the north and south sides, particularly over the doors. And if you want to brick them all the way up, or if you want to put some kind of other architectural enhancement there, I would be fine with that. I could see possibly a sign facing to the west, which would face towards Meyer. So just at least the people coming out of Meyer or driving that way would see it, but not on the east or the west. I agree with the need for screening and the not removing of the mature trees that are there. So now I'm done.
Very good. Bill, anything you want to add before I move on?
I do not have anything to add.
Okay. I'm going to just reiterate some things here myself so that we're all up on the same thing. Matthew, could you bring the rendering up on the side facing Haggerty, please? The color rendering.
This is the side facing Haggerty.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything here right now. Let me see. Wait, hang on. Oh, hang on. I can't. Okay, that's the side that's facing Haggerty.
That's correct.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Let me reduce down to the. This is Haggerty Road,
right?
North, south, west, east. West is the back of the store.
Okay. Show me the east side.
That is what we've been seeing, Larry. You can actually see the Meyer ground sign in that.
Yeah, here's the Meyer sign.
Yeah.
Right. But okay. Matthew. Okay, so over on the far left side, you can see the existing Meyer sign.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem I have with that wall is just you got to put some windows on that wall.
And yes, through the church, I acknowledge that we were going to put additional fenestrations in here. It may be spandrel glass because the restrooms for the patrons are here, but we will put more windows on the front elevation.
And maybe for Mr. Pisco, the buildings that are due north of you that are on the outlet of Meyer, there's some history with those. And I think if the, hindsight being 2020, but the view from Haggerty Road of those buildings, if we were to do it over again, would be completely different. They would look much more like a frontage amongst the front row. And I think that's maybe some of what you're hearing from the Planning Commission is we would want the Haggerty Road side or the east side of this to look like a storefront as much as possible.
That's my exact feeling too, George. Thank you.
I've eaten my body weight at Cold Stone Creamery, so I'm very familiar with small shops.
And the EFS, I think there's just too much of it. So we're going to have to do something else when we get to the site plan, which will be next. Unless we want to discuss that now, it may be a better time to do it now. What alternatives do we have as far as all that EFS showing? My signage thing too, is the one sign, two at the most. I would like to see no more than that.
Yeah, but let me ask if they, obviously we have a standard that they have to meet. And if they meet the standard, I don't know that we have the ability to hold them hostage over and above that until we come up with a revised ordinance.
I know, I understand that. I'm looking for a voluntary, something voluntarily from the petitioner here to say, okay, two signs would be enough, four would be overkill.
Through the chair, if I can, we're not trying to be gluttons for additional signage. We don't have the benefit being an out parcel within the site. We don't have the luxury of having a monument sign that's visible from the street. So we've got mature trees on the boulevard in front of us. And the traffic coming this way, this is fairly opaque. Looking at if this was the only surface that had signs, this has a good shot of being seen, but all of these signs are going to be interrupted because of the landscaping here. And we're putting in quite intensive landscaping all the way around this building. The signage on the back of the building is de minimis. And I suspect it's going to be blocked by the trees. This signage is, if there's a quid pro quo, if we can lessen the EFS and get signs, since we don't have the benefit of a monument sign, there's just not a lot of visibility from the angles of people approaching with the trees, the existing sign. We're handicapped by visibility, I think. So I'm certainly open to suggestions, and we'll work with Mr. Campbell to come up with something. We're going to be before Mr. McKeever shortly, anyhow, to discuss the petition.
So is there any opportunity that Meyer would want to share their existing monument sign with you?
Through the chairman, trustee, whatever, I don't believe so. It hasn't happened in any of the other Meyer sites that we've worked with.
Dave Campbell, this is to you. The foliage, the trees off of Haggerty Road there, that is Meyer's, that's on Meyer's property, that's right?
That's correct, and it would remain so.
All right, so has anybody been in discussion with Meyer or what is going to happen with that? If, yeah, that would be good if you could get that.
And essentially, this is what we're going to be behind. That's opaque.
I got it. I don't know what to do about it. That's the whole thing. I mean, I'd love to help you out, but the only way I can help you out is if Meyer gets involved with this, and Meyer is not involved with it. So where do we go from here?
I guess to a certain extent, the signage is for the benefit of folks once they actually enter the shopping center. That they'll see us. I mean, that rendering that you saw is actually developed from a 3D model of our drawing. So we kind of have a very good idea of sight lines, and it's definitely challenged. But we're putting the sidewalk across the front. I don't know to what extent. We can certainly ask Mr. Levitt at Meyer what we can do there to help. But it would be temporary because what we put there will, even if they're ornamentals at some point in time, are going to get mature like these here, because several of these are ornamentals that are very large. And in a few years, we'll be back to where we started from.
Larry, I fully expect that sometime in the near future, they're going to be asking to remove and or prune some of that existing vegetation out there. And before they do, and I hope Mr. Pisco is listening, they would need to get approval from the township to do that, because all that landscaping is part of an approved site plan from Meyer from, I think, 1991. So when that day comes, we can either review it administratively to ensure that they're only taking down the bare minimum, and that whatever they're taking down, they're replacing with something of equal value somewhere else on the site. And if they're pruning anything, that they prune it in a responsible way. That's how I'd like to handle that. Is handle that particular aspect administratively when that day inevitably comes.
Well, I get that, Dave, and I'm all for it, but nobody's been in discussion with Meyer, and maybe they should be having a heads up of what's coming off here. Improve all this.
I would say Jiffy Lube, in their negotiations with Meyer on this piece of property that they're trying to create, this would be a point of the conversation of what is to happen with this this mature landscaping out front. And once they've agreed on a course of action, then they come to the township to get administrative approval of an amendment to the Meyer landscape plan.
Through the chair, if I can, Mr. Campbell, we would never, ever prune, reduce, cut down, or change the landscaping on someone else's property without their explicit and the township's permission. We're completely aware that there's an existing development agreement. We don't operate that way.
Okay, but Meyer might be tempted to say, yeah, cut it all down. We don't care. And Meyer can say that all they want, but the township cares.
Well, I guess that's where I'm coming from, Dave, here a little bit, is nobody's discussed this with anybody. And this is all if come type of stuff. And I feel bad for Matthew, and I couldn't care too much about Meyer because, it's Meyer. But I think we should discuss it with them and find out where it's going. I don't like to do things backdoor. I'd like to do them up front.
Well, I don't think that's anyone's intent, is to do anything backdoor. If this site plan were to be approved tonight, all of that landscaping that we're looking at on that Google Earth image, all of that landscaping would have to remain. The only way that landscaping ever gets amended is for an amended landscape plan for the Meyer site to be approved either administratively, or if it's more significant than that, we can bring it back to the Planning Commission.
I get it, Dave, totally. But the problem I have is nobody's mentioned this to Myers. One day they're going to come in and just say, hey, I don't like that. I'm going to cut it down. And that's, it's always better to ask forgiveness than permission. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe we should bring this up with them beforehand so that they understand what our problems are, what Matthew's problems are, and that somebody doesn't go in there and start cutting this down. We've had this happen before.
We have.
I don't want to see it again. It's a very uncomfortable situation. Happened right on Martin Parkway.
Right.
Through the chair, this is Matthew. We will reach the topic with Meyer. I just don't know where the quid pro quo space is on their site that they could accommodate more landscaping, or if it would, after it's all said, we're going to be putting an 8-foot sidewalk in there too. So some of that might call itself out as well, where we have to, if we have to articulate the sidewalk or whatever, but I don't know. We'll have to look at get record drawings from you, Mr. Campbell, on what the landscape plan was approved and potentially through aerial imagery where we could augment, but I don't even know if Meyer's amiable to that. So we'll have to ask, and we will certainly take up that mantle.
Dave, you understand where I'm coming from, right?
I do.
Okay.
And right now, those trees aren't going to get touched.
Okay. I'll take you at your word.
I'll chain myself to those trees tomorrow morning.
I can live with that.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. Reiterate one more thing, Matthew, just to you, absolutely no outside storage on anything there.
No.
I want to drive there at night and see it as clean as a whistle when we go by there.
Plain as a whistle.
Clean as a whistle. That's what I want to see.
We can go up to 26 Mile in Lennox Township on a secret mission. I'd be delighted to go with you.
Well, I'm down in Florida. I don't think that's going to happen right now.
Yeah, it's good. Has a cold spell up here too.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't have anything else to add on this. So anybody else want to chime in? We've had a lot of discussion here. I think most of it's positive. The EFA situation, I'm not happy with it. I still want to get something resolved with that.
Larry, on that matter, if I could, David, maybe this is a question for you, but I know we were going back and forth talking about the signs, and I guess my question is who in this instance grants the sign exemptions for a property like this? Is it during our review of the special land use, or does it automatically go to the ZBA? I guess I just don't understand how that asking for an exception. How does it?
Signs are reviewed and approved administratively by the building department. And that's for a matter of efficiency. We don't want to have to come to the planning commission every time there's a change out in a tenant space and they have to wait 30 days because they want to take down the Cold Stone Creamery sign and put up a Subway sign. So they're reviewed and approved administratively by the building department. Building department is already aware that they're asking for too many signs on this Jiffy Lube. They're entitled to one wall sign and they're asking for a total of 4. So the petitioner would then appeal the building department's denial of their sign permit to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so to answer your question directly, it's the Zoning Board of Appeals that will consider the sign exceptions for the Jiffy Lube. And those sign exceptions would be for 4 wall signs where only 1 wall sign is allowed.
But as part of the special land use, I'm sorry, but as part of the special land use, could we as a planning commission decide to grant them additional signage, number of signs, I guess? Okay, there you go.
Well, I didn't hear the answer.
No.
That was going to be my answer too. I think the planning commission can make it clear to the ZBA, and I think already has to a large extent, given that Mr. McKeever is obviously plugged into this. But no, the planning commission is not in a position to usurp the ZBA's authority when it comes to sign exceptions. But you can certainly have it noted in the minutes your opinion. And while I have the floor, I think, as I was trying to say earlier, and I'll try to say it again, I think that this question of the EFS will be easier to answer for myself and for Mr. Pisco once the ZBA has spoken on the signage. Once it's understood what they're allowed to have as far as wall signs, then I think it would then make more sense to look at where EFS can and can't be permitted on this building. And I hope that you'll can give me the administrative authority to work with Mr. Pisco to make some revisions to these building elevations and reduce the amount of EFS on the most prominent sides of this proposed building once we know what the ZBA is going to allow them as far as wall signs.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, Dave. For a funny reason, I trust you with this stuff, and I don't think there's a problem. You know what our feelings are. We made it pretty clear. Bill McKeever, we also hope that you'll take to the the zoning board of appeals are the feeling about the 4 signs that are up there. I hope that, I know you'll transmit that, and then we'll see where the pieces fall out. And Dave, yes, if you can work with them architecturally, I'd love it. I'd love it. I'd like to see them go ahead with this. And yes, you can handle that. You know what our feelings are, and that's the most important part. All right, anybody have any more comments before we move on? Nope. Okay.
Did we ever close the public hearing? I don't think we had any public comment.
I opened it and I closed it because there was nobody there.
Okay.
Okay. So George, you have to make an motion on this?
So I'll do the first one, and then you can, I'll do the,
Well, hold on.
special land use
Hold on. before you do
approval.
that. Hold
So
on.
I will move to approve.
Wait a
I'll
second.
move-
Wait a second. One
No,
second.
I'm going to make a motion.
I'm going to let you do that, but Brian Pirro, you're going to make the next one, so be prepared. Okay, now you can go.
So I'll move to approve PSU 21-02, special land use for Jiffy Lube Automobile Service Center and a new outlot to be created within the parking lot in the Haggerty Road Myers store within the B3 General Business Zoning District in the Haggerty Road Corridor Overlay District. Special land use approval is based on finding that the applicant has demonstrated to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission that the proposed use complies with the special land use criteria of section 34.08 of the zoning ordinance, as well as use standards of section 26.304. Special land use approval is based on the following conditions, of which there is 1, approval of a corresponding site plan by the Planning Commission.
Mr. Weber, since outdoor storage was something that you asked about, if you were so inclined, you could include a condition of no outdoor storage.
So let me ask, is it better to have that as part of the special land use or part of the site plan?
I would say
Okay.
special. I would say special land use.
Then I will add that condition number 2 being that there will be absolutely no outside storage.
I'll second that, Larry.
What's that? You'll second it? Okay, Deb, it's up to you.
Deb, do we want to do roll call?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Weber,
Aye.
Winkler,
Aye.
McKeever,
Aye.
Carroll, Kareem,
Aye.
Rebeck,
Aye.
Haber.
Aye. Okay. Brian Pirro,
I'm up.
you're up.
Mr. Haber, I'd like to move to approve site plan PSP 21-03, a new 3,064 square foot automotive center to be developed on a 0.54 acre outlot to be created within the Meyer property at 1703 Haggerty Road. Approval is based on a finding that the site plan complies with the applicable standards of the township zoning ordinance, including those applicable to a new commercial building within the Haggerty Road Corridor Overlay District, so long as certain conditions of the Planning Commission noted below can be included on a revised plan. The Planning Commission's motion approving the site plan for Jiffy Lube shall infer an approval for amendment of the Meyer Stores site plan, originally approved in 1991 and most recently amended in 2016. Site plan approval is subject to the following conditions. Number 1, review and approval of engineered construction plans by the township engineer, fire marshal, and building department. Number 2, a revised plan to be reviewed and approved administratively, showing an 8-foot sidewalk along the Haggerty Road frontage of Myers property. Number 3, a land division application to be reviewed and approved administratively, subject to the applicable procedures of Commerce Township, Oakland County, and the state of Michigan. Number 4, any new signs to be reviewed and approved under a separate sign permit by the building department, subject to the requirements of Article 30 of the zoning ordinance, and any sign exemptions for additional wall signs be carefully reviewed by the Zoning Board of Appeals in the context of minimizing the traffic concerns of excess signage along the high traffic thoroughfare that is Haggerty Road. Number 5, no existing landscaping or I'm guessing I should read or vegetation on the Meyer site to be removed without administrative review and approval of a replacement plan. Number 6, a revised site plan be submitted for administrative review and approval by the planning department. Revisions to include the following. A PIPP plan or its equivalent. B, revised building elevations demonstrating that EFS will comprise no more than 25% of any building elevation and in color to confirm the proposed color palette. C, screening of the utility equipment on the west side of the building as directed by the planning commission. D, building elevations to confirm that rooftop mechanical equipment will be screened. Number 7, review by the township attorney of all necessary easement, cross access and or maintenance agreements to ensure Meyer and Jiffy Lube peacefully share driveways, drive aisles, parking areas. And I believe that's it, sir.
Mr. Farrell, was one of the inclusions windows on the or spandrel windows on the Haggerty side elevation?
Yes, I would add that as number 8, and I appreciate that, Dave. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was about to add on to.
And Dave, the placement of those would be handled administratively through you?
Yes.
Yeah, but the obvious placement seemingly is on either side of the existing window that they're showing right in the center.
So maybe it's just administrative approval from the planning director to approve the east side of the building, something that's going to make it look more like a storefront.
Yes.
And no outside storage, was that in there somewhere?
That was in the site plan or the special land use.
Okay. Is there any comments, any additions or corrections, or has it been seconded?
McKeever,
McKeever seconded. Okay, Debbie?
Carol,
Aye.
McKeever,
aye.
Rebeck,
Aye.
Kareem,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Winkler,
Aye.
Haber.
Aye. Matthew, welcome to Commerce Township. Good luck. How long do you think it's going to take to build it?
It's got to be done in 2021, so we're going to be going post haste. So thank you very much for your consideration. I think you'll be delighted with our efforts.
Okay, stay in touch with Dave, and because he's going to have a lot to say on what's going on here.
You betcha.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to PPU 20-02 Midtown on Haggerty. This is our second review for a PUD. Dave, if you have any comment on this?
I'll try to be brief. This is our second preliminary review for a PUD. This is not a required step. The preliminary review step is required, but that's something that the Planning Commission did with the proposed developers back in January. However, the developers took very seriously the comments they heard from the Planning Commission and made some significant revisions to their proposed plan and wanted to bring it back to the Planning Commission for a second preliminary review to see if the Planning Commission feels that they are on the right track and would be wise to then proceed to the next step in the PUD process, which is to hold a public hearing and to develop a PUD agreement and a PUD plan and have that go in front of the Planning Commission and then in front of the Township Board. What they didn't want to do is go to that expense with the PUD agreement, which requires a lot of work from the attorneys. They didn't want to take that step until they presented this revised concept to the Planning Commission to see if you feel they're on the right track. I'm not going to try to bring up screen sharing because that might mess things up. And I know father and son, Steve and Spencer Schaefer, want to do a presentation with a video that they created, a flyover animation simulation of what their development would look like. I hopefully got all of that or got that video to all of the planning commissioners ahead of time. It is a big file, and so we're hoping it's going to go okay viewing it over Zoom. But that's why we wanted to get it to the Planning Commission ahead of time, just in case it doesn't work so well over Zoom. The most significant changes to what the Planning Commission saw for this project, which by the way is called Midtown at Haggerty, is to the residential component, which comprises the westerly 2/3 of the property being on the west side of Haggerty Road, north of 14 Mile. The residential component, the Schaefers have removed one of the proposed apartment buildings. So instead of a total of 10 buildings, now there's a total of 9. They've slightly reduced the amount of units being proposed from what had been 190 to what is now, I think, 187. And if I'm incorrect on any of these numbers, I know the Schaefers are going to correct me. And the one of the comments they heard from the Planning Commission, and specifically Mr. Haber, was a suggestion that they evaluate whether these buildings should be serviced by an elevator, because these are 3-story buildings, and the idea was that you might be limiting your market of who might want to rent one of these units if there's no apartment service. So what the Schaefers have done is they've taken 2 of their buildings and combined them with a center vestibule atrium structure, and within that structure would be an elevator that would service both the buildings that are connected to it. That building is now a 4-story building, or 2 4-story buildings connected by the elevator. With I believe the intent there that there's one less building on the site, to allowing them more space for open space and green space, but then to retrieve the number of units that had to go away because that building was removed, to add a 4th floor to the buildings that are serviced by the elevator. So I think those are the most significant revisions to what you saw back in January. And if I missed anything, I know the Schaefers are going to include that in their presentation. So unless anyone's got any questions to me, I will turn it over to Steve and Spencer. I will mention again that this is still an informal step. There's no formal action that's being sought by the Planning Commission this evening. Just some good direction, so that if the Schaefers are back in front of the Planning Commission in, I guess, either April or May with a formal proposal, they want to know that they're on the right track. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the Schaefers.
All right, Steve, you're on.
I'm gonna leave it to Spencer this evening, so I'll fill in anything that he may overlook.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate the introduction. So first thing I'm going to do is go through a couple slides in the presentation, then we'll get into the video, and then I've got a few more slides afterwards. Oops. Let me screen share first. That would be useful. I just want to confirm, are you all able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is our revised site plan. We were last in front of you guys back in January. Since then, we've taken some time to implement the comments from the last planning commission meeting into our planned Midtown on Haggerty development. In totality, we believe that this revised plan creates a substantially better community. So there were 4 key issues. Dave mentioned some of these that we aim to tackle with this revised plan. First, relating to open space and density. Second, related to empty nester friendly development. Third, building height. And then 4th, exterior materials. So talking about open space, Dave is correct. We decrease from 10 buildings to 9 buildings, and this vastly increased the amount of usable open space within the development. And we've also significantly enhanced our pedestrian walkways within the development. Additionally, we have a strong defined connection into the retail, which I will show further as we get into the video and some of the pictures later on in the presentation. Empty nester friendly. So right now we have over 40% of our units, 54 units out of the total 187, which have no stairs or are serviced by an elevator. So we have 3 buildings and buildings 2 through 9, excluding 1 and 3 that have 3 2-bedroom units that will be easily accessible for empty nesters. And then obviously buildings 1 and 3 that are 4 stories high, those sit on the rear of the site. I'll talk about this multiple times throughout the presentation, but the benefit of locating these buildings in that location is that the natural grade is 5 to 6 feet lower than it is on the rest of the site. So it sort of hides those buildings. Additionally, having a fourth story gives us enough critical mass to the point where we can justify an elevator. We don't want to put a shoddy elevator in here. We want to put a nice commercial grade elevator in here that isn't going to fail and it's going to withstand the test of time. Third issue is building height. So again, buildings 2, 4, and then 5 through 9, those are 3-story. They're 32 feet high with a small parapet wall, which is there to essentially hide any equipment that we have on the roof. The 4-story building is 42 feet high. But again, as I stated earlier, these two buildings sit 5 to 6 feet lower than the remainder of the buildings because of the natural grade that's on the property. Lastly, exterior materials. We've taken those comments to heart, especially, and the proposed buildings now include all brick, all masonry, or they include a premier cement board siding with a strong mix of materials and colors. So I wanted to show this side by side. On the bottom of the slide, you can see our old plan, and on the top, you can see the new plan. So we have decreased the amount of units from 190 to 187. But the biggest two things that we've been able to do with this plan is, one, vastly increase the amount of usable space. We have some cool pictures, and it goes through it in the video as well, what we're planning to do with this large park area in the southeast. And we were also able to add some nice outdoor amenities near the clubhouse, which we believe was key. The first plan was a little bit tight. This one we feel has a lot more, again, usable open space where we can do some cool trail systems, have dog park areas. So we believe that this plan better utilizes that space. So project location, a couple of things I wanted to talk about here. We've reached out to several of our adjacent neighbors. We've spoken with representatives at Kroger and Home Depot, and we've also spoken with the Murrays, who own the shopping center directly to our south where the Kroger is situated, and Ark and Jonah, who actually owns this shopping center just east of the hotels. All of them were very complimentary of the plan. And additionally, everyone was excited about the additional foot traffic that this development could help generate for not only their businesses, but the nearby retailers. On another note, you know, we've been speaking with Dave Campbell these past 2 months, and he mentioned that there were some questions after we submitted this most recent plan in the video to the planning commissioners about the height of the 4-story building. The purpose of this video, which I have on the following slide, is to show that this 4-story building will not be seen as much taller than the 3-story buildings that are on site, as the building situated at the lowest part of the property. The back portion of our property, the piece that's next to the wetland, happens to be the lowest buildable elevation in the whole commercial quadrant. I just want to mention those hotels, which are just west of us, that you can actually see from Haggerty Road, sit approximately 10 to 15 feet higher than our site. Also, we have other buildings such as Home Depot, the Regal Theater, Lifetime, and obviously the hotels, which are between 35 to 40 feet high, in addition to the water tower, which is on the south side of 14 Mile Road. That's also very similarly 30 to 40 feet high. So now I'm going to transition into the video, which we prepared at Mr. Campbell's recommendation, because I believe it truly does help put a lot of these items that I've talked about in perspective. So with that, I'm going to pull out of this quickly so I can get the video up. I forgot who the name of the individual was, but if I want to try to get a higher quality, is there a certain button that I have to click?
Yeah, so you're going to hit the screen share button, and then once it's showing you all your different options, there's going to be 2 check boxes at the very bottom, and one will say to amplify your video or make it more stream friendly.
Are you able to see this video? Yeah. Oh, that's Zoom. Where's my video? Are you able to see the video?
Oh, no, not yet.
We're still on the.
Oh, okay.
Shoot.
I'm not sure that's your video.
Yeah. Resume share. Let's do new share. Shoot. All right. I'm going to go into my drop. Oh, here it is. Okay. Now it pulled up. Initially, it wasn't there. Okay. You guys can see this?
Yeah. Just
there it goes. Okay. It says Midtown on Haggerty, Commerce Township.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you can see here that we vastly improved the geometric layout of the buildings. This was to maximize residents' view of the green space. I'm going to pause here for a moment. Additionally, we pulled back the units on what was on the southern end of the site from the proposed drive-through that's located in the southeast corner of the site. And this was so we could create a large community amenity and green space area. More details will come here shortly. Additionally, we've created densely landscaped buffers to our commercial neighbors, both within and outside of the development. So now we're transitioning into what the view will look like off of Haggerty Road. So we've created very attractive commercial elevations that have elevated facades that further vary the architectural appeal of these buildings. So this is building B, that's building A that's further to the north. You can see that we have our drive-through pickup window right over here. And then we're going to transition into the patio area that we have between the buildings. I want to mention here that we have welcoming storefront elevations on the rear of these buildings. And we believe that this is going to promote easy access for our residences just over to the west. So in addition to having a beautifully landscaped outdoor patio area, which you can see here between the two buildings, we're also going to have a defined brick paver / pedestrian walkway area that's going to extend outward from Haggerty Road. These brick pavers right here and here actually continue into the parking lot. They go through. We have a nice spine sidewalk throughout this patio area. And then we have brick pavers and additional sidewalk through the apartment development just behind.
Spencer, before you move on, let's
Go ahead.
stop for a second. This Haggerty Road that's right there on the right?
I'm sorry?
No, he's asking if this is Haggerty. No, go back up.
I'm
Maybe
sorry,
wanna
can you
back
repeat
up.
that?
Yeah, what view are we looking at here?
So this is the east-west spine road within the interior of our development.
Okay.
So if I can get back here to the beginning, that's this road right here that separates the commercial from the residential.
So the parking, where is the parking? Off of Haggerty Road?
Correct. The parking is in the front, situated closer to Haggerty Road. Okay. So I'm going to stop right here. You can see that 4-story building here in the back that we'll get to in a minute. But I wanted to state, because of the natural grade on the property, the 4th story on the rear buildings is hidden. With grade variation, this 4-story building appears to be the same height as the rest of the buildings. So you can see we have a lot of color variation between the buildings. We actually have an A concept and a B concept, one that's a little grayer and another that's a little bluer. And we believe we have great curb appeal from all sides. As you'll see here momentarily, there's a striking front elevation, and we're going to get to the rear elevations here momentarily. I want to also mention that we have several landscape pocket parks and gathering areas throughout the development to promote walkability and outdoor gathering spaces. Right here, you can see these are the rear elevations of the buildings, and we'll see them towards the end of the presentation as well along the spine road. But you can see we've worked very hard to create an appealing elevation from all sides of the building. So now we're transitioning to the beautiful 4-story building, which features a prominent glass atrium in the middle of the two buildings. You can see that right here, that accesses the elevator. Again, I want to state, you know, this parking lot slopes down slightly, but a lot of the grade changes where this building is going to be situated. So, you know, the parking's not buried. There's not going to be they're all going to be walkout units. The building is essentially going to function the same, but because of the natural grade on the property, because of the fact that it's the lowest part of the property, it's going to sit a little lower than the rest of the buildings. Oops. So this is our clubhouse area. I want to stop here momentarily. We're going to have a host of both indoor and outdoor amenities, such as a coffee bar, community room, dog washing station, changing rooms. And then you can see we have this pool here outside. We're also going to have some luxury lounge chairs and cabanas. We have a barbecue area, and I don't show it here, but we're also looking at doing some covered fire pit areas and more. One of the key things now, especially in the COVID environment, is not creating large scale amenities. It's about creating a bunch of pocket amenities, smaller amenities that around 6 to 8 people can congregate at rather than a whole bunch of people. This is another view of the rear elevation, which we truly believe is striking. So last element, this is our main drive, our main spine road. It's going to be magnificently landscaped, I apologize, with walking paths on both sides, as well as having a variation of architecture. You can see that you see the sides of the buildings and the backs of the buildings as well. And here I want to pause. This is the last element. We're going to have a central park with some nice landscape plantings, community gardens, as well as covered terraces. So this video ends right here, showing a slight bird's eye view. So this is a little bit higher than what you're going to see from a car, but you can see, you only see about half of this 4th story building, which is very nice because of those grades. And the way we've situated these buildings, we've tried to barricade that 4-story building as much as possible from Haggerty. So as people are driving up and down Haggerty and 14 Mile, that 4-story building, you know, you're not going to be able to see much of it. So with that being said, I'm going to exit out of this video and I'm going to hop back into the presentation. All right. I'm trying to get that screen share feature back up. Screen share. And then we're back into the presentation share. Full screen. You all able to see this presentation?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'll breeze through this because a lot of this material is very similar to what we had shared with you in the January meeting. We want to do cool commercial elevation. Again, this is a development that was built on Orchard Lake between Maple and 14. We'd like to do something very similar in terms of materials, but also be able to pull some of those colors that we showed into the buildings, into the commercial, so there's some nice synergy. So I know we showed you a video, but I wanted to go through these elevations a little bit further to see if you had any questions. You can see multitude and variation of colors. You know, we've got some lap siding, and then we've got some board and batten here as well, both of which are a cement board type siding. You can also see that we have variations and colors within the garage doors. This is the back view of the building. We also have this cool orange-like cement board siding that's faux wood that we feel like adds some further variation and architectural appeal in these buildings. And then this is the B building. You know, again, very similar materials, slightly differ, and we believe that the colors work well in complementing each other. You know, again, we have 9 buildings in this development. We don't want to create something that's monotonous. Varying those materials, we feel like will go a long way in creating nice curb appeal within the development. This is the back, and then this is the 4-story building. We feel like this atrium is really going to be the centerpiece. Very cool how we have all that glass there. You'll be able to look through and look back into the wetland. And then the elevator is actually situated right here, right off of that atrium. And then this is the back elevation of that building. So some of the sample materials, we're looking at using James Hardie, you know, other type of cement board siding, as well as some masonry products. So you can see those materials here. I wasn't able to capture all of them, but you can see the variation. We have no Dryvit, you know, no vinyl. All of these materials are very sturdy and are going to hold up for at least 30 to 40 years. And then I went through these interior renderings. If you guys have specific questions about that, I can go back to it. But these are the last couple of slides I wanted to go through. You can see we're going to have some very nice landscaping, both within and along the perimeter of our development. Also, we're looking at doing knee walls on both of the buildings where there are proposed drive-throughs to help further shield that from the eventual users who are going to be in the apartments. You can see we had that nice defined brick paver pathway that we went through in the video, and we've got very nice patio between the units and nice landscaping throughout the development. We're also going to have some nice prominent signage along our main spine road that goes to Haggerty. This goes through some of the amenities, so you can see the fire pit areas that I mentioned during the video. We're going to have a couple of those, 2 or 3 of those situated here in this park area. We're also going to have 2 separate grill areas within the development. also have a nice area for a dog park. And this is the area right here that we're really going to look to do something cool, some nice native landscape plantings, do some community gardens over here as well as doing some rooftop terraces. I also want to mention a couple of the items that Jan Culbertson brought up at the very beginning of this meeting. We're actually doing a development in Pittsfield Township where we have to embrace a lot of those concepts that Jan talked about. And I feel like we could easily embrace, all electric appliances. That really helps to reduce the carbon footprint. Energy efficient appliances, making sure we're doing energy efficient design to keep the heat within the building, prevent that thermal leakage. Also, we're looking at doing some EV charging stations, not only in the parking lot, but within some of these garages, as well as doing ride sharing. We believe that these concepts are really going to really kickstart in the next 5 years, 10 years. And we want to embrace these early on. As trying to do these concepts after you've built the building is a lot more costly to do than doing it while we're constructing the new building itself. And then lastly, I showed you some pictures here, but we want to do nice, smaller clubhouse and do go to outdoor space where we can do a lot of amenities outside. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap up the presentation and we'd love to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Hang on just for one moment here. I gotta get myself straightened out. Okay. Anybody have any comments? Let's start with Bill. You got any comments or anything you want to?
Same comments. I appreciate it. Nice concept. I feel it's too dense. There's too many dwelling acre.
Okay, it's hard to, for some odd reason I was having trouble hearing you. You think it's too dense yet? You still feel that way?
I still, nothing's been done to address the density.
Okay, anything else, Bill?
That's my comment.
Okay, George?
Well, first of all, I'd like to, for the Schaefers, I think you guys are a role model when it comes to planning and working with the Planning Commission. Every time you've come to us, you've been buttoned up, clear, concise. Your thoughts are extremely well investigated, and you generally answer a lot of our questions before we ask.
Thank you.
I'm getting a lot of feedback for some reason. I went to the property again today to look at it. And I think I've said it before. I think this is the only piece of land within Commerce Township that I'd even think about entertaining something like this. I struggle with the fourth story. I went and looked at the video, and I understand what you're saying. But depending on which way you're looking at the development, I agree from Haggerty Road, those two buildings will be mostly blocked or screened. I'm like Bill, I'm struggling with the density. I'd feel a lot better. So first of all, I like this layout in terms of buildings, and I'd like it even more if building 3 and 4, or 1 and 3 were 3-story instead of 4-story. And I see where that's taking units away from you, but you're basically trading that building for having your pool and your clubhouse area that was not in your original design, as well as some of the other green space. So I don't know that I have a definitive answer for you. I like the development for this particular piece of property. I'm still struggling with the 2 4-story buildings that are there. Without the 4 stories, I could live with it. And I do think that this is still going to be this is not going to be a slam dunk when it gets to the township board, specifically as if for nothing else, from purely a density discussion. So I don't know if that helps or if I've just confused myself and you at the same time.
No, you said it well, George. We got it. Is there anything else you want to say?
No.
Okay, Brian Pirro.
Thanks, Larry. I just think, I agree with everything that's been said. As it relates to density, I mean, between this and the previous site plan, we reduced by one building. But then we obviously went to 4 stories on 2, only reducing the overall number, the overall density by 3 units. So I think that's a trade-off. We got a little more green space. But again, we're gonna, as other commissioners have mentioned, we're going to have 2 buildings that are 4 stories. And it, again, to Bill's point, it doesn't really solve for the density issue. I think we got to be, I know this is preliminary, but we really got to be careful. Especially, we don't want to waste everybody's time if this isn't going to be approved by our board. So I don't have much else to, other than that. I think the design's great.
Okay, well, thank you. Chelsea, what do you got to say?
I mean, personally, the 4-story buildings don't really bother me because they're kind of in sight line with the 2 hotels, which I'm sure are probably a similar height. And these buildings look a lot nicer. I really like the exterior of the building from what I saw from the virtual part, but obviously this has to get past another level from here. So if the height's going to be an issue, but I really like what you guys did.
Okay, Sam, any comments?
I really think this is an improvement on this previous site plan. I personally don't have a problem with the 4-story building because it's on the back and there's the wetland behind it, which separated from the streets and the buildings and the area behind it. So I don't have any problem with it. So.
Brian Winkler.
Larry, I really like what the petitioner has done in revising the site plan to address previous comments from the Planning Commission. The added green space, the way they've incorporated the 4-story buildings into that end of the site. And I really like what they've done. It's been a very thoughtful change. And one context item that's important, I think I should bring up at this point, is if we go to the west of this subdivision, if we go to the west of this development, there are 2 4-story hotels that are along M5. So it's not that it matters, but at least there's a, it's not the only 4-story building in this area. And it kind of complements that, if you can use that term.
I agree.
Just wanted to mention that. Otherwise, this petitioner knows the challenges this site will have and this development will have potentially with the township board, but they've done a great job.
All right, well, Spencer and Steve, I think you did a really nice presentation. It's nice to see somebody in the 21st century instead of the 20th century. But I have to tell you, I have a real issue with 4 stories. I was dead against when these 2 hotels went up. I was against it. I didn't want it. And it got by us. We're setting up a bad precedent here for the rest of the township. And precedent by me is a very big thing because once you open the gates, everybody goes through it. So I really have an issue with the 4 stories. I like everything else about what you've done. I think it's great. One question, I'm just, this is just discussion phase because you can do whatever you want when you come back to us. Can't say where it's going to go, but you can do whatever you want. One problem I have is with the commercial situation. For some odd reason, it's bothering me an awful lot to have the parking right on Haggerty Road. And I'm not sure what's bothering me here. I can't really tell you. But I think I'd rather see the stores closer to the parking in the back and not so much parking in the front. That's just my feeling. I don't know if anybody else will agree with what I've just told you. That's just the way I feel about it. I'm just not really happy about those two instances, the parking right now and the 4 stories. I kind of like everything else you do, and save me an apartment building if you buy it, because I think I'd like to live in that area. But those 2 things are weighing heavily on my mind. I can't predict what the board will do, but I think that they will not like 4 stories. So with that, that's all I've got to say. If there's anybody else that has any comments, bring them forth now. If not, we can move on. And you fellows are welcome to do what you want to do.
Can I just make a couple of quick closing comments? They'll be brief. I think that, we have to understand where this is located, around all this commercial with, a lot of massive buildings, the Home Depot, the Lifetime Fitness. This is really, I think density is really important and is going to make this successful. We don't want this to get lost between 2 shopping centers and the Home Depot. And, we did look at doing some parking in the front, but the only real problem is that the drive-through,
Buildings in the front,
the commercial buildings in the front, the drive-throughs get to be really kind of funky and right up onto Haggerty Road instead of being around the back. And with the residential behind it, we kind of felt we wanted to have a nice, clean, double-sided building, because you potentially have 187 residents that would be utilizing that back area quite a bit. Also, I really agree with you, on the height, on the, as far as the height goes, you do have those hotels, and those hotels are greatly elevated by about 12 feet over the top of this site even. So this is the lowest point. And I think that the 4-story building from Haggerty Road's really not going to be very apparent. So, we'll continue to try to, improve on the plan. We do want to proceed cautiously and slowly at this point. We are looking to have an informal hearing in front of the board to kind of get their feedback as well, because I think we all understand we don't want to spend a lot of time on something that we can't all agree on or get a meeting of the minds. So we're really trying to get as much feedback as we can as we go through the process to bring, a great development, to this location. You see a lot of this type of development going on now down on Haggerty and 8 Mile. There's another one in West Bloomfield that I think is I think it's 5 stories behind single-story retail on Orchard Lake Road.
And another one coming.
And I think another one coming next door. But this really provides for a great quality of life for somebody that wants the convenience of having a grocery store next door. You could, actually walk to the Kroger, someone that's maybe not as mobile, and having, some of the entertainment in the area. The density, I think, is important to create the right scale for this development, considering what we're surrounded, by. So on that note, we'll keep marching forward, and hopefully we can keep improving on the plan and bring you something that the township can be proud of.
Stephen Spencer, before we conclude this, is there going to be management on the site or management office on the site?
Correct. Yeah, we'd envision that being incorporated in the leasing office.
Okay.
That's going to be in the clubhouse.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Good luck with your pursuit. Anybody else have any further questions? If not, we'll move on.
I was going to mention real quick that the Schaefers are correct. They want to get this in front of the township board for a presentation. I think the intent is that they are going to do that at the board's meeting on March 9th, which is a week from tomorrow. just so that the board has an opportunity to have an informal conversation about this proposal as well.
I think that would be a wise thing. Good luck with you guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 4 here is PU 12-24-01 Commercetown Place PUD waiver discussion. Dave, why don't you bring us up to snuff on this thing and let us know, we can talk about this and then decide what we're going to do. Is this going to be a vote on this? Or is this just?
No, so this is mostly a discussion item for the planning commission. Although if there's a general consensus, I would love to hear it. And I know acting DDA director Watson will love to hear it too. This is a decision of the township board, what we're going to discuss here. And a decision that the board could potentially make at their meeting next week, Tuesday. But I fully expect that the board, when they are discussing this, are going to say, well, did the planning commission weigh in on this? And I want to be able to tell them, yes, they did at their meeting on March 1st. So what I want to do is now share my screen, because I think this is really one where showing the aerial photo is just going to make this discussion a lot easier. So I want to share a screen. And I want to go. I thought I had it all teed up. Hold on.
Best laid plans, Dave.
Absolutely. All right, now this should share screen. There, that's what I want. All right, can everybody see the aerial of Merrill Park and Martin Parkway?
Yes.
Okay, so Merrill Park, Pulte Home Development, 69 homes on the east side of Martin Parkway. That includes sidewalks all the way through the neighborhood and 2 connections to the Commercetown Place pathway system. So one of those connections is right about there, if you can see where I'm moving my cursor. And the one that's relevant to tonight's discussion is this pathway that goes back into Merrill Park's nature area and their detention pond area and does a loop around their detention pond right here. It's actually a very lovely walk if anyone ever wants to go back there. But the question that's going to be coming before the township board and the planning commission is whether the pathway should be extended from this stub that we had Pulte put in when they built Merrill Park across this property, which is owned by the DDA and is marketed as Parcel L, out to Haggerty Road. So a little bit of history. This property where I'm moving my cursor around that the DDA now calls Parcel L was actually once part of this larger property. It was unit 2 of the Commercetown Place site condominium. And the intent, well before Pulte or before them, Hunter Pasteur proposed the Merrill Park project, was for whatever developed on unit 2 to have access both to Martin Parkway and to Haggerty Road. So the idea was there was going to be a road that meandered through the property somewhere and linked back up with the roundabout at Martin Parkway. When Hunter Pasteur originally proposed the Merrill Park project, they did not want to have this secondary access to Haggerty Road. They thought that having 2 points of access off Martin Parkway was sufficient. And so in their negotiations with the DDA to buy Unit 2, they said, let's split this off and make this a standalone parcel that the DDA will retain ownership of. And then we will have our neighborhood only have access to Martin Parkway. So that's what ultimately happened. This bigger Unit 2 became Unit 12, which ultimately became the Merrill Park neighborhood. And this property became what the DDA markets as Parcel L. But the PUD, the master PUD that guides the entire Commercetown Place development, which includes Merrill Park and 5 and Main and Barrington and all these big developments that are coming along Martin Parkway, called for a system of pathways and specifically called for a pathway that goes across Parcel L out to Haggerty Road. And that's right in the PUD agreement. There's an exhibit, a pathway exhibit that was included in your agenda packet for tonight that shows there being a pathway going somewhere across Parcel L, across whatever would someday develop on Parcel L. Well, someday is now today, because the prospective buyer of Parcel L is the Goddard School, or the franchise owner for the Goddard School, which is Kelly McDonald. But she, in her negotiations with the DDA, is effectively saying, I can't have a pathway going across my property. It's a safety concern, both for inviting strangers to come across a daycare property where the staff is not going to be in a good position to kind of monitor who's coming and going through sort of this back door through the property. And it's also concern of little ones, you know, seeing that pathway as an invitation to take off down into this area and, you know, God forbid, find their way into a detention pond. That's of course something nobody wants. So the only way that Goddard School, as I understand it, and Ms. Watson can explain this better than I, but the only way that Goddard School will make the deal on parcel L is if this requirement for there being a pathway going across parcel L is waived by the township board. And that's a township board decision that they potentially are going to make next week, Tuesday. Now, what the DDA and Deb Watson are suggesting is that down here at what they call parcel C is a better and more feasible opportunity to connect the entire pathway system that meanders all through the Commerce Town Place development, to have it connect to Haggerty Road through parcel C. So parcel C is owned by the DDA and will someday develop. If the DDA wanted to sell it as a gas station, they could have sold it 100 times over, I think. But they want this to be something better than a gas station at this corner. They see this as something of a gateway from Pontiac Trail into the Commerce Town Place development area. So whatever develops here, that developer would be obligated to put in frontage sidewalks and would be obligated to put in a pathway that would probably hug along this property line next door to Walmart. And they would come across this dog ear of the Walmart property right here, which the DDA already has an easement to come across there, to come across Walmart's property. And then would tie into the pathway system right here, where a pathway already exists that ties into the back paved, you know, parking and loading area of Walmart. So the DDA is requesting that the township board waive the requirement for a pathway extension across parcel L, and in lieu of that, require of whoever buys this property from the DDA that they put in a pathway connection along this property at what would be a more prominent corner of Pontiac Trail and Haggerty Road. The last thing I'll mention, and then I'll turn it over to Deb. She did a very comprehensive analysis of this whole request. Is if you look at where a pathway would come across parcel L and where it would end up, which is somewhere along this stretch of Haggerty Road, there's not a lot of great options of where someone who's walking and or biking would go once they get to this point of Haggerty Road. There's a sidewalk along this daycare, which is the kinder care facility. But if you look to the north, there's no sidewalks along any of these you know, light industrial shops and so forth along Haggerty. And furthermore, if you look to the south, and if I zoom in a little bit, there's a guardrail along the west side of Haggerty Road that actually comes right up to the edge of the road. And I actually walked this, and there's no way to get past this guardrail without actually walking out onto the pavement of Haggerty Road and kind of taking the life in your own hands as traffic sails by southbound on Haggerty. This is actually a really steep slope right here down into this wetland area. So one of the questions I think that the township board is going to have to consider is, you know, where are we even inviting people to go if we were to require a pathway across here? And I think there's an argument that you're not inviting anyone to go anywhere safe. I mean, their last resort would be to make a mad dash across Haggerty Road to get to the pathway along the east side of Haggerty in West Bloomfield Township. So if the township board were agreeable to waiving this pathway requirement, part of what the DDA would do in their deal with Goddard School, with the permission of Merrill Park, because you'd be coming on their property, is to remove this, I think it's like 75-foot stub of existing asphalt pathway, pull it out and, you know, restore it with grass seed and so forth, and have this potential pathway connection go away and someday be replaced with a connection down here at Pontiac Trail and Haggerty. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I will, I'll see if there's any questions for me. Otherwise, if Deb, if you wanted to make your own presentation explaining this better than I can.
All right, Deb,
Dave, I'm a little, sorry, go ahead.
Take off your corresponding secretary hat. Put on your DDA hat.
Deb has
Yeah.
to change hats.
Well, David's really covered it very well. I can't share my screen here with the two computers I have set up. I don't have this file on there. Dave, can you pull up the packet and bring up page 177 and 178? Can you share that, or do you have it handy?
I will in about 20 seconds.
Okay.
You start talking for 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Dave did a great job of presenting. I would just stress that these are both placeholders, these pathways on parcel L and parcel C. And the placeholders, they're not easements. They're not recorded easements yet. We do have an easement with Walmart for the pathway to go around the back of their property in that little dog ear that Dave was showing you on his aerial. But as to the placement of the pathway through parcel C, it can go anywhere on parcel C. I would recommend, as Dave was showing, that it go along the wall there. But that's a very expensive connection to make back there for that 270 feet of connection to be made. It's about $46,000. And Jason Mayer had prepared these for us, the cost estimates. And it's about $28,000 to go through parcel L. So we'd love to reroute those funds over to the pathway connection at parcel C. And that'll still get us through to that corner, but it'll get us closer to where there's actual sidewalks. As Dave was showing, it's fragmentary on Haggerty Road and dangerous. So where are we leading people? That was a very good point, Dave. So I see that it would be beneficial not only for Kelly, but also for parcel C and the connection we're making there. The location where we have the easement, that's not in the PUD, and it's not in the condominium either. And it's not even our property, nor is it the property of the developer who will be buying parcel C. So the DDA owns the easement there, so we can facilitate that connection. And I really feel that this would be a much better use of those funds than to require a pathway on a parcel that's connecting to nothing, and then we would be losing the sale of this site too. So I'd love to hear your comments, and I'd like to answer any questions you might have. Dave, on your screen there, that's showing the parcel L. Can you go to the next page? And then just zoom in on that so they can see where that connection is, that 270 feet. Yep, right there. So that's on Walmart's property in that dog ear, and Jason's highlighted it for us.
All right, Deb, where is this? I see the part that's in red. That's the whatever you're calling the dog ear. How is that going to connect to Haggerty Road?
It could either run down the fence line or the retaining wall that Walmart has there. Now, on the pathway plan, they just kind of zigzagged it through the property, or I believe they may have gone along that wetland there also. So it could go out to Haggerty, or it could go down to Pontiac Trail, but it would still get you up to that corner from our pathway system, as opposed to putting you out on Haggerty Road where there wouldn't be any sidewalks. And this connection would be made when parcel C is developed, and then the sidewalks would be built along the front corner there.
Yeah, Larry, how this connects to the Walmart dog ear is probably going to depend on what develops on parcel C and how it gets laid out, and what the best route would be to get to right there.
Dave, how much are we going to have to say about that?
About how parcel C develops?
No, how about how that pathway is going to extend through the property, around the property, out to the street, up to Haggerty Road, up to...
Well, the good news is the township would kind of be able to come at whoever develops parcel C in both directions, both from the DDA standpoint and from the township standpoint, where the DDA could say, look, we'll sell you this property for this price, but you are going to be obligated to put in a pathway that gets from point A to point B. The township, I think, would have considerable say on how a pathway would get connected through parcel C.
How and where it would go.
Yes.
Okay. All right, anybody else got any comments that you want? This is just the recommendation to the township board. We don't vote on this. So anybody got any input? Brian Peril, anything?
I just think it's imperative that the Goddard School is able to purchase this property and develop it in the right manner.
Brian Winkler?
No comments.
No comments. Chelsea?
I don't have anything to add.
Nothing. Okay, Bill?
I have nothing to add.
Nothing. George?
Just that it makes sense that the path connect at Haggerty and Pontiac Trail and not just head into a dead end on Haggerty Road. It's completely illogical. I think the only question that I would have, maybe from put my board hat on, is should the township be paying to have the 75-foot stub removed, or is that and Deb, I know that you had mentioned that the DDA would fund that out of the proceeds, but since the DDA is completely in debt to the township's funding that portion. So that would be my only question is, you want to buy this piece of land. You don't want the stub to be there. On the other side, yes, we want to sell the piece of land. So
the issue that arises there is it's taking place on someone else's land. So I know that the developer, Kelly, does not want to deal with working on someone else's land. And I don't know that Merrill Park really wants us to remove it either. If the pathway connection is removed through parcel L, then I'll certainly follow up with them again to see what their decision is on that with the permission of the township. I would rather see it removed, and it would make sense to have the loop back there, but it's challenging. We'd have to have a construction easement and permission to go on there and remove that and clean it up. It would be nicer overall than ending at a fence if that's the case. So
well,
we'll see
if
how
this is going to the board next week, and I read that basically 50% of the people surveyed said they didn't want to see it go away. They wanted to see it there. But we don't know if 50% was 2 people or if 50% was 50 people. So I think the board's I think that's an important factor since it's not our land as a piece. And then if they don't want to do anything, I think it's then back on Goddard Schools that says, put an 8-foot fence up, and yeah, it'll just be a dead end into an 8-foot fence.
Yeah.
Sam, was there anything you wanted to say? I kind of missed you there.
It's okay, no comments. I think it's all said, well said.
All right, Dave, do you have the answers that you need here?
I think I do, and I would ask the same question of Deb, whether this is enough direction for us to have a conversation with the township board with Mr. Weber's input, obviously, as well.
Yes, I believe it is. George, would you recommend that I try to contact Merrill Park again before our meeting to get more information from them for the township board's consideration?
Yes, well, especially with the 50% of the people did not want us removing that stub on their land. I think having some kind of clarity on what 50% means, and if there's any opportunity to have further discussion with them on it. I mean, obviously and I would just talk to them from the safety standpoint saying, look, this is going to be a daycare and nobody wants a back door through the woods into a daycare. So what's the best solution for this?
So let me sum things up here so that we go back and we're all talking about the same thing. I don't think we have a problem with changing that easement on there and eliminate the easement and moving it down south, farther down to the Walmart property or the Pontiac Trail. That's, I think, what we have to go to the board with, saying that we don't have a problem with it. They're going around our opinion. Our opinion is we don't have a problem with the easement being eliminated. I think that's what you want to say, Dave, isn't it?
I want to be able to tell the township board that the planning commission looked at this and here's what the general consensus was.
I think you've got it.
Thank you.
Good enough?
Good enough for me.
Good enough for you. Item number 5, Benstein and Loon Lake northeast corner. Is this a conceptual review? We're just going to give them our opinion and what we think about this particular thing, and who's going to be speaking for this? David?
I'll start off, and then I hope Al and Rob are still awake and still with us, because they are prospective partners on this this proposal. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing again. I'm going to pull up the aerial. It's not what I wanted. Here's what I want. Okay, so hopefully everyone's looking at the intersection of Bensine Road and Loon Lake Road.
Yes.
So as far as helping you get your bearings, I'm sure Mr. Winkler knows where he is because he's right around this area. But this is the property at the southwest corner that is currently under construction for a project the Planning Commission approved a couple of years ago for Windwheel Estates. This was, I think, 23 new single-family homes. So the prospective developers this evening are now looking on the north side of Loon Lake Road at this property, which has been for sale for some time. And what they hope to do is develop it with 14 single-family homes. And the way they'd orient it, and I know you have a concept plan in your packet, but they would take this road stub to the north for the road whose name I'm forgetting right now, and extending it in this general direction and bringing it down to the north side of Loon Lake Road with 14 single-family detached condos, most likely. What they're showing in their packet is primarily ranch units that I think are intended to be marketed toward the empty nester crowd. The lot sizes vary a little bit, but predominantly they're about 72 to 7,400 square feet with 60, let me make sure I'm reading this right, 65 feet of frontage. So that's a lot size that's more consistent with our R1D zoning district. And what this property is zoned is R1B. So R1B requires minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet and I believe 80 feet of frontage. So for this project to come to fruition, what the prospective developers would need would be a zoning amendment for this piece of property. I've had several discussions with them, and the direction I've given them is that if this were to proceed, it would almost certainly have to be a conditional rezoning so that the Planning Commission and the Township Board know what the outcome is going to be. They know what the project is going to be before they make a decision of whether or not they're going to rezone the property for it. This is a piece of property that may be familiar to some of our Planning Commission members who were with us a couple of years ago. There was a different prospective developer who was looking at this property for something comparable, although they were seeking a couple more units, I think 17. So they were looking for lots that were even smaller than what's allowed under R1D. So in their case, they would have had to do it as a PUD, a planned unit development. So this group is looking for a product that would be consistent with R1D zoning, which, as I mentioned, would require a zoning amendment. So as we often do, I suggested that they come to the Planning Commission for a informal conceptual conversation to see if this is something that could potentially get legs. And that's what they're hoping to have a discussion with the Planning Commission here this evening. So I can answer any other questions, but I know that Al and Rob are on the meeting and would want to make a brief presentation on their own behalf.
All right, let's go. Who's going to speak first, Al or Rob?
I can speak first. My name's Alan Pruss with Monument Engineering. I represent Desco Properties on this case. And like Dave said, we're looking to get some feedback from the Planning Commission on, rezoning the property in order to develop it the way Dave described. So the property is at the corner of Bensine and Loon Lake. Both of them have 60-foot half right-of-ways. So we're losing about 25% of our property. The 5 acres goes down to about 3.8 acres. Another issue that we're contending with is a pole line. Actually, Dave, I apologize. I should be sharing my screen.
Well, do you want to show the site plan? Because I got it in front of me. I can.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I should have this down by now. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yep.
Yes.
So as I was saying, the red line, not quite centered through the property, is an existing overhead wires. There's 3 or 4 poles that bisect the property. We're trying to design, our conceptual plan is trying to incorporate that so we don't have to relocate those at expense. Discussions with the township engineer and the township planner, we do need to connect to the existing public road to the north of us. So you can see we need to make a little bit of an S curve there in order to, make that align or make that connection. Kind of hinders the geometry at that end of the development, along with some stormwater management that's required through Oakland County. Had some discussions with the county road commission. They're open and allowable to discharging to Benstein. That's why we place the detention basin up in that northeast corner of the property. And that's the way the property generally flows anyway, so it kind of makes sense to locate it up there. We kind of make a little bit of a transition if this property was rezoned. You have the higher density zoning across the street on Benstein with attached condos there. So we kind of make a little bit of a zoning transition between the higher density and the R1B single density or single family to the north of us. The current zoning is the R1B, as David mentioned, but it says 12,000 square foot and 70-foot width on the lots. So it really isn't, I'll say, conducive with this property anyways, to have a road go through the property and then have those size lots on either side of the road. The current lots that you see along Benstein are currently 112 feet deep. In order to get to 12,000 square feet, we'd need to be about 170 feet deep. So it'd be almost to the west side of the road that we're showing here. So there's a few challenges on this property, and that's one reason why we're looking at the rezoning option and looking for your feedback tonight.
All right, are there any other comments from your folks?
I don't know if Rob, if you want to say anything, Dave, did you want me to go over the models, or can you bring those up for the commission to show them some of the floor plans that we're looking at? I think there's 4 different models here that we're looking at. So there would be a variety of different houses and elevations provided for this development.
Yep, and Mark, we did have those in our package, so we were able to look at all the different elevations.
Okay, thank you. And we're happy to answer any questions that the commission has and get some direction.
All right, let's start with you, Brian Winkler. What do you think?
Larry, a couple of things. With only 15 lots, assuming that our anti-monotony standards would apply to this, it's important to mention to the petitioner that it'll be a challenge for him to meet those anti-monotony standards. He'll have to have a lot of control over what model of house goes and on what lot to meet those standards. As a kind of an FYI to the Planning Commission, if we go back to Windwheel Estates, which is on the southwest corner, across Loon Lake from this, one of the unanticipated benefits of that development that was pointed out to me by one of my neighbors who has high school age children or high school age kids, when they leave for school in the morning, they have to come out of my subdivision on Scenic Lane, and there's no signal, and making a left out of that at 7 o'clock in the morning can be really difficult. she pointed out to me with Windwheel Estates that the connection that makes to Foxcroft to Loon Lake allows those same high school age kids to actually go to the signalized intersection at Loon Lake and Benstein, which is an advantage that this same development will provide to Twin Sun Lakes. So just something I just wanted to point out. And then a question for Dave. Dave Campbell, do you know if the Road Commission is doing any kind of study for that intersection and the signal at Benstein or Loon Lake? Because the way that's set up is really dangerous, where you have people going north on Benstein, turning left on the Loon Lake, and there seems to be, more often than not, a conflict with cars that are passing the people turning left, but there's people in the center lane that aren't turning left and go straight.
Yep.
And I just wanted to ask Dave if he had any information, if the Road Commission was looking at that intersection.
And we do have a few intersections like that in Commerce, and I'm sure elsewhere in Oakland County, where it's not real clear the delineation between the left turn lane and a passing lane. And if somebody's not using their blinker, it can create confusion and potentially a dangerous situation. I don't know, Mr. Winkler, whether this is one that the Road Commission is specifically looking at. I know that when Windwheel Estates was proposed, going back 2 or 3 years now, that signal was evaluated as part of the traffic study for Windwheel Estates, and it was determined that that signal and that intersection would continue to operate at levels of service that were acceptable. But I don't know that the Road Commission is looking at that signal in the year 2021. I can certainly ask.
Dave,
Thank you. I just wanted to point out those things to the petitioner and to the Planning Commission.
we appreciate that. And in our meeting with Dave early in February, I do believe he mentioned that a traffic study would be required to move this process or move this project forward. So that would be part of, further things that we would do, and again, to make sure that they're, we're adhering to safety and keeping things in line with the community.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Chelsea, you have any comment?
Oh, I don't have anything right now.
Okay, Sam?
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Okay, Brian Peril? Nothing. Okay, George?
First of all, I like the elevations, but second, I think this area of the township is completely saturated. So I would not support going from R1B to R1D.
Okay. And by the way, George, I concur with that too. I don't see any convincing evidence here why we should change that yet. I haven't seen that. Bill, anything?
No, I'm on the fence.
You're never on the fence. You always have an opinion, Bill.
I do on this one. I tend to lean with you and George. Where the density is concerned.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just gave you my opinion. I don't see any convincing evidence why we should change the zoning on this thing. So Al and Rob, you can take this information, either go with it or come back to us, and whatever you would like to do, we're more than happy to hear from you.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay.
Before we cut them loose, and I know it's getting late, but can I ask a quick question? So there's a kind of a companion property right next door to the west. I could pull the aerial back up if it helps, but it's another 5-acre parcel that currently has one house on it. And I have no idea if the people who live in that house have any interest in selling or whatnot. But my question to the Planning Commission is, would having that property be assembled with this property have any bearing on any thoughts of density and or the potential for rezoning?
Well, I can answer that, Dave. And I think what you have to do is explore it and then bring it back to us and let us look at it so we can discuss it.
So
It's a good idea. Go ahead, George.
So I just so I understood, Dave, so are you saying, obviously, if somebody were to buy both of those parcels and then come back with a proposal R1B or a more dense than what it's presently zoned for?
I think my question is the latter of those two. If it were both of these properties, does that make any difference, good or bad, with what these prospective developers are asking as far as getting a higher density zoning at this corner?
Can you pull the aerial up real quick?
Yeah, in fact, I
And-
thought I had it up, but I forgot to screen share. Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
So this
And
is
so
obviously the
can you-
property we're talking about with one little house, and then this is the property right next door to it with a larger house on it.
So can you pull back just a little bit? Or is that as far up? Yeah. So my personal view is when you look at all of the different plots that we're looking at right now within that area and going towards the south, towards Shearwater, et cetera, I just think this area, and you add that new development where your cursor is right there, we're saturated in my view. So if it's somebody's coming in and wants to do something with the way the property is presently zoned, then they're in accordance with the zoning. But going more dense in this corner is seems like overkill to me.
George, it's a good point, and I think I would agree with it. And I think if Bill gets off the fence, he would probably agree with that too. I don't mind them acquiring the property, but I don't think we need to rezone it.
I know, and Dave did mention in his review letter that it is in line with the township's master plan for density.
Okay, we let you know our opinion, and you can take the ball and run with it and let us know what you would like to do.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our last one, amen. And by the way, I'm going to put in for double pay tonight. So the township board can approve that, George. You'll see that that's done, please. Because this meeting is now into its 3.5 hours. And we haven't had one of these in years. So anyways, section 2.8316, off-premise alcohol sales, text amendment concept review. Dave, you want to hit this? Give us a brief overview, and then let's hear what the petitioner is looking for.
Keyword being brief. This is a topic that's obviously very familiar to the Planning Commission for a couple of reasons. One is the gentleman who wants to have a discussion with the Planning Commission tonight is Mr. Zaradine, who was in front of the Planning Commission with his architect back in September with a site plan to demolish the existing retail store of his gas station at the southwest corner of Union Lake Road and Commerce Road, and replace it with a newer, larger retail building while keeping most of his canopy and most of his gas pumps. That site plan was approved. It was a site plan with a special land use. Mr. Zaradine now, I think once some of the estimates are coming back for what the price tag would be to do the construction, is really hoping that he can justify the construction by expanding upon what he offers inside his store. And what he would like to expand upon with is alcohol, beer and wine, and I assume packaged spirits if you were allowed to do that. But I'll let Mr. Zaradine speak to whether or not he would want to include liquor with what he wants to do. Mr. Zaradine is aware that the zoning ordinance as currently adopted, and particularly section 26.316, has a number of limitations when it comes to off-premises alcohol sales outlets, places where you buy your beer and wine and liquor in a container and you go take it home or take it elsewhere to consume, as opposed to at a bar or restaurant where you consume it right there on site. The specific provision within 26.316 that is challenging for Mr. Zaradine's location is the limitation that there shall be no more than 2 alcohol sales outlets within any 1 mile stretch of road. So if you can picture this particular stretch of Union Lake Road, there's a couple party stores, there's the Kroger store, there's the Shell station further north. And so there's already well more than 2 existing alcohol retailers along that particular stretch of Haggerty Road. So what Mr. Zaradine is hoping the township, both the planning commission and the township board, would consider is an amendment to the township zoning ordinance and that particular section of the zoning ordinance that would provide him an opportunity to sell packaged alcohol. Mr. Zaradine has not gone as so far as to draft what that text amendment might be, and understandably so, because I think he would have to get an attorney involved to draft a text amendment, and I don't know that he wants to have that expense until he at least gets some sense from the planning commission of whether this is a possibility that he should even be pursuing. I know I've had conversations with some of you about, how would such an amendment impact other properties and other locations in Commerce Township? And the answer is it's hard to know because we don't know exactly how we would tailor a text amendment if we were even to do so. So I think what Mr. Zaradine is looking for from the Planning Commission is just some sort of sense of, is this a road that is worth him traveling down, or is this something that the Planning Commission and the Township Board have answered a few different ways on a few different occasions, and that answer is going to remain the same. So I will pause there, see if there's any questions for me. Otherwise, I'll let Mr. Zaradine speak for himself.
Mr. Zaradine, we're willing to hear from you. Keep it brief, please.
Sure. Thank you for your time, Mr. Campbell. Thank you. So it's basically what David described. I put a narrative, and I fully respect the intent of the restriction. It's hard for anyone to argue with that sort of restriction on its face. My points were realizing the investment, the competition, the changing dynamic, really, the changing dynamics with respect to work from home, more gas is not really the primary source of revenue, and a few other reasons that I put in my narrative, which I'm sure you've had in your packages and seen. And to keep it brief, basically, I exchanged an email with Mr. Campbell and said, hey, if there's an opportunity to look at this again, considering again, the changing landscape, the changing dynamics with that sort of business and the convenience aspect of it and so on, and we'll go from there. So unless you have any questions for me, really, it's
okay. I'm going to take the ball on this one because this is a very sensitive issue to me. Mr. Zaradine, we've looked at this thing upside down and backwards more and more than once. What you don't know is this was a compromise for 1 mile. I wanted 2 miles. I tried to prevail in the Planning Commission to do that, and they didn't wish to do that, so we kept it at 1 mile. But I don't see any reason why we should change this. This is if we do this, we open this up to everybody else in the township to do this, and I frankly can't see that happening. We want to keep it the way we have it. We've infinitum. We have looked at this. I feel for your position. I understand your position on this, but as far as I'm concerned, and I don't know how the rest of the commissioners feel about this as of yet, because I haven't asked anybody. I will in a moment. Sure. I don't feel that we need to change this. I think it's just fine the way it is. With that, does anybody wish else to make a comment on this? Just raise your hand or let me know. Yes, George, I knew I could count on you.
So Mr. Zaradine, first of all, I think the letter you put together was outstanding. I think it was educational, and I think it made your point very clearly. Anything having to do with hard spirits would be 100% no for me. On the subject of beer and wine, I would not support anything that would open up the Pandora's box that Larry referenced. And some of that is because I don't know what Pandora's box is for this. I don't know how many other, not just existing businesses this would affect, but anybody that would build something new. As we've gone through this in the past couple of months, we only have roughly 7 square miles, I think that's the number, of commercial property within the township. And within those 7 square miles, we have a proliferation of establishments that sell alcohol. So, adding one, is not going to have a huge impact. But what we do for one, we have to do for all. So I don't know where that stands, but I would be leaning with Mr. Haber's comments of saying no without understanding a lot more.
Okay, anybody else have a comment? I see Brian Winkler shaking his head. Brian Pirro, anything? Kelsey? Sam?
I do agree. I mean, once you open the Pandora box, you're gonna have tons of people would ask for permission. No, I do agree with you.
Okay, Bill, any comment?
I agree with you, Larry.
Okay. Mr. Zarity, I'm sorry to tell you that we probably would not be want to go forward with changing this ordinance. I think it's fine the way it stands. I hope that the township board would agree with us. You're more than happy to talk to them if you would like to. And with that, I'm going to move right on. Is there anything more you'd like to say, Mr. Perry?
No, thanks for your time and consideration. It's a checkbox that I had to go through, and I understand. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there any other matters coming before the Planning Commission that we'd like to speak to? Anybody's got any comments? I'll go back to one, Dave, the bridge lights. Anything doing?
They've been ordered. We did an insurance claim to be able to pay for those bridge lights, taking depreciation into account because they're a couple of years old. We ordered them from a shop in Novi. They're a specialty item, so it's certainly not something they have on the shelf. We're expecting them the first week of April. And once they show up, we have an electrician who hopefully will be ready to go and get them installed.
Okay, I'll tell you one more time. I think we should put 3,000 volts into that. Anybody that touches it will know who it is at that point. Okay.
Hey,
anybody else have any comments other than my crazy ones?
I just want to know
Larry?
the order.
I did want to mention one thing. You talked about a long meeting. Well, we earned our raise today.
Yeah, well, it wasn't enough. I think we're working on 50 cents an hour right now. So that's
Anybody calling in from a state where the temperature is higher than 40 degrees doesn't get to make any comments about length of time and suffering.
George, let me tell you what the temperature is. I'm looking at it right now. It's 71.7 degrees, and it is
There you go.
10:30.
You
And I
have
know you
permission.
feel sorry for me because it's really bad.
We have permission to move on to the planning director's report, if any.
Oh, I have just been swept under the table. I love it.
Just a couple projects that we may see in April. One is a concept plan for, if you can picture the property at Commerce and Cary Roads. I jokingly call it the Tom Zoner International Airport because that's where former Supervisor Zoner lands that death trap of a powered paraglider that you see him flying around in if you look up. So that property is on the radar of some prospective developers who have owned it for a long time and now might be ready to move ahead with proposing something on it, and they might want to put a concept plan in front of you in April.
I hope it's beer, wine, and liquor store.
It is not that. It's zoned residential and they want to keep it residential. But of course, like everyone else, they'd like to get more residential than what the zoning allows.
You know, I've been on this for 20 years now, and I want to see one developer come in to say, I want to decrease the amount of places we're going to put in. We're going to build bigger houses. Just one time in 20 years, I'd feel a lot better about it. Dave, if you have nothing more, I am going to put this meeting to sleep.
The other thing I had isn't all that important.
Oh, do it. We've gone this far.
Mr. Weber and I and Mr. James are, and also with our treasurer Molly Phillips and our Parks and Rec director Emily England have been working on evaluating all the properties that Commerce Township owns, which is quite a portfolio, and we own all these different properties for all these different reasons. Some of them are just tiny little scraps of property. But the intent is that we are going to make a presentation to the township board at their meeting next week, Tuesday, on what we recommend the board do with at least some of those properties, particularly those properties that we think are worth putting out in the open market and selling to either adjacent property owners or to prospective builders or people who want to build a house on some of these lots.
Can you have Paula send us out a site map of what that looks like, what the properties are, so we can look at that?
Well, I'm looking at Jay James's box down there, and he's nodding his head because that's something that Jay's was hopefully working on, and hopefully is getting close to having something ready. Jay?
Yes, I'm working. Jason's helping me out with that, and we have a map for our meeting Wednesday.
I would like to see that. I'm familiar with some of them, but I'm sure there's a lot more than I'm not. Well, if anybody has an objection, I'd like to take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is it seconded? Oh, come on.
Second.
There you go. Before we go through the roll call on this, I will remind you that April 12th, not the first week in April, because that's a Easter Monday, but April 12th is our next meeting. Be there or be square, as everybody have heard that before. So now that it's moved in second, Deb, do you want to call the roll call?
Yes, Peril,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Winkler, Brian, Winkler,
Aye.
He fell asleep.
McKeever, Bill McKeever,
Bill, yeah.
Weber,
Aye.
Kareem,
Aye.
Seaver.
Aye, and good night to you all. And I thank you for being so patient. If Dave tries to pull another one of these 3.5 hours meeting, he's going to have to answer to all of us.